Walking along the top platform slowly was Fex. His usual neatly swept-back black hair was now a complete mess. The stress of everything was getting to him, and he felt like pulling his hair out. More than felt like it. There were times while walking where he had literally pulled out small parts of his hair from his head. Nothing noticeable, but he didn't even realize he had been doing it. He needed everything to go perfectly and still felt relieved that his sister had actually agreed into letting him do everything on his own. The only problem was he had a time limit. He needed to finish everything by tonight. To pull everything off that he had planned, he needed some help. He couldn't do this alone. Eventually, Fex had arrived at the small little coffee shop where the others were sitting outside. It was an hour later than they had planned, but it was still only 7 p.m., plenty of time for the rest of the evening. Sunrise was the time limit. "Hey, is everything okay with you?" Quinn asked, seeing the mess that Fex's hair was in. He had been acting strange all day, and now his appearance on top of this. Something must have been wrong, and now with the event over, he could ask. With an awkward smile, Fex approached Quinn and started to whisper in his ear. "Do you mind if just me and you can talk in private for a second? I have something important I want to talk to you about." Fex whispered. Hearing this, Quinn's heart started to beat, and slight butterflies were felt in his stomach. If it was something that Fex only wanted him to hear about, then it had to be something to do with vampire business. The two boys left the group at the table and walked off slightly to the side. There was no one around them to listen in on their conversation, and they could now talk freely. "So, what is it?" Quinn asked. "Did something happen?" Fex went to fix his hair up and had a nervous look on his face. He never was a good liar, and today he had to put the performance of his life on. The only problem was he had to do it more than once. "Quinn, you're going to hate me for this." Fex placed his hand on top of Quinn's shoulder and looked to the floor before lifting his head and looking Quinn in the eye. "This is it. Have the vampires come to get Fex? Do the military know about me? What is it?" Quinn thought nervously. His palms were now sweating, and he just wanted Fex to blurt it out as the tension was killing him. "I'm in love with Layla." "What?" Quinn shouted out so loud that the others at the table could hear. It was something he had never expected, out of all the possibilities. "Layla, I mean. Quinn started to stutter his words. He was so surprised. "I thought you had a thing for Erin." Quinn said. "Erin, no, that was different. She was a skillful one like a diamond, but there were no feelings," he replied as he grasped his hands and pulled in towards his heart. He was trying to make it seem as if this was a painful conversation for him to have. "With Layla, it's true love. I know you two are quite close, and I didn't know whether you liked her either, but the thing is, I don't know how much longer I can stay here, and before I go I want her to at least know my feelings." Fex then turned around so Quinn couldn't see his face. He wanted to make this as dramatic as possible for him. There was always the chance that Quinn might have been able to see through this type of act. "I know nothing can ever happen between her you see and me, but I want her to at least know, and I wanted you to know before I asked her, because you're my blood brother, right?" Suddenly, everything was starting to make sense to Quinn. No wonder he had been acting so strangely for the whole day. A confession was always a big deal. With Layla, Quinn didn't really feel like he had any special feelings for her. He did feel protective of her, but didn't know whether or not it was beyond a friendship. Even if he did like her, Fex was so passionate right now. He could never deny him this chance. But what he did know was Fex was right. The two of them really were blood brothers. "Go ahead," Quinn said. "Make sure you tell her exactly how you feel." After hearing those words, Fex's eyes lit up as he turned back around. "That's great," he said as he started to push Quinn in the direction of the hotel. "Just head home, and I'll get the others to do the same. I plan to do it as soon as possible." "You mean now?" "Yes, now. Just go," he said as he gave another small shove. With that, Quinn walked back to the hotel room with a little smile on his face. It would be nice if two of his friends became an item, but it was a shame if Fex did have to go back. "Good luck, brother," Quinn thought as he returned to his hotel room. Seeing Quinn walk off and away like that, the others who were at the coffee table were wondering just what was going on. The two of them seemed to be so dramatic about something and were a little worried that Quinn had disappeared off somewhere. Still, that quickly changed when they saw Fex walking towards them. He didn't have a face of joy or laughter like he did when talking to Quinn. This was the face of business. With his 2 hands, he swept back his hair and sat down in one of the seats that was placed around the table, and the aura that was coming off him was suffocating them. It quickly reminded them that Fex was not a human, nor was he a human that had been turned into a vampire, but he was a true vampire. Now that Quinn is gone, I have something important to say to you all. I usually joke around, but this time I'm serious. You may have many questions, but I urge you all to listen and hear me out to the end. Fex paused for a moment to see if any one of them wanted to say something there and then, but they all understood it was an important matter and you to listen in carefully. Good. The vampires have discovered me, and they know about Peter. They don't know about Quinn yet, but it's only a matter of time. I want to first say this is my fault. They only came because of me, but after finding out about Peter, they can't let him live. To explain quickly, he is something called an illegal. Vampires do not have permission to create others without notifying their leader. Since Quinn created Peter without a leader's permission, Peter is considered an illegal. Usually, when we discover an illegal, they are executed on the spot. As for the one who created him, they are taken back to the Vampire Council to be judged for their crime. Now, I have no intention of turning Quinn into them. Ever since I got here, he has done so much for me, but they won't leave until I give them the vampire that turned Quinn. With that, I have a plan. Luckily, Peter knows the transformation skill. If we give him disguised as Quinn, that should be able to satisfy them. I will report back saying I have killed the illegal while also giving them a fake Quinn. Here's where I need your help. There are a few problems with this. Everything needs to be done today. I have told them I would deal with everything. I will be going to break out Peter, and for that, I think, Logan, you will be the best to help me. The second thing might be an even bigger problem. I'm sure we all know if I told Quinn of this plan, he would never agree to sacrifice Peter for himself. Even when I spoke to him earlier, he still thinks there is a way to save Peter. The truth is, this might be the only way to save him. The humans will experiment on him to no end, but the vampires will at least give him a quick death. Giving Peter to them is not enough to fool them. We can smell our own kind, and Peter himself is not a vampire but a subclass of a vampire. If I handed Peter over, they would be able to tell he was a fake in an instant. Out from his pocket, Fex placed the flask on the table and put it in front of Vorden. During my time here, I have come to the conclusion that, Vorden, you are the closest to Quinn. Whatever it takes, you must fill up that flask with his own blood. But it's important he does not find out about this. I have a suggestion which I think only you could do, and that's to knock Quinn and force the blood from him. He is a curious one. If you try to come up with an excuse, there is a good chance he will follow you, and it will ruin the whole plan. By the time Quinn wakes up, we will have already been gone. Fex had finished detailing out everything to the others, and they couldn't quite believe it. Both Logan and Vorden had suspected something like this would happen one day. They just didn't expect it to happen in the middle of an event like this. The other thing was they didn't even have time to prepare. They would have to act immediately. Vorden picked up the flask and placed it in his back pocket. We have no choice. We have to do this, Vorden said. But I have one question. Surely, sooner or later, they will find out that Peter is not the person they are looking for. What happens then? Will they come to look for Quinn again, and what will happen to you once they found out you tricked them? The serious face on Fex had changed to quite a sad-looking one after hearing this question. It was almost as if he had prepared himself for something. The vampires are careful ones. It will be a while before they send someone after Quinn. At least this will give him more time. Quinn is special, even though I know that. He gets stronger by the day. As for your second question, that is not for you to worry about and for me to deal with. With everything said and done and with no time to waste, the group split up and proceeded with the plan. In the middle of Fex's explanation, after hearing and learning that the matter had something to do with Quinn, a particular person had found out that he could be in trouble. In the dark backroom of Vorden's mind, Sil had stood up and was interested in what they had to say. Most things seemed uninteresting to him, and with nothing happening so far that relied on Vorden using him, he had remained quiet. He listened carefully while standing by Vorden on his left side and Rayton was there on his right. The explanation had just finished as Fex asked Vorden to gather Quinn's blood. Well, of course, We're not going to agree to that, right? Rayton asked. Hey, I know I'm crazy, and I'll fight anything. But do you remember what happened last time? He turned into that bald-headed monster. Sorry, but I'm not fighting in this one. Rayton, didn't you just say you would fight anything? Vorden replied back, annoyed. Sorry, I refuse to fight anything that's that ugly with no plus side. At least when fighting a beast we get a crystal out of it. A human, well that's just fun, but that. After hearing what Rayton had to say, Vorden was concerned and was hesitant whether or not to agree to the plan. Quinn was definitely strong. If it was the Quinn from a few months back, then maybe without Rayton's help and a strong ability, he would be able to knock Quinn out and gather some blood. Right now, he would need at least 2 strong abilities to increase his chances. It wasn't just a question of winning such a fight, but being strong enough to overpower Quinn to the point where he could win without having to badly hurt him. He could always try to find an excuse to ask about the blood, but he couldn't think of anything right now and needed a backup plan in case that didn't work. It looked like Fex's suggestion of beating and knocking him out was the best one. The question was whether he could do it without Rayton's help. Say, we'll do it, Sil said all of a sudden. This response came as a surprise to Vorden. The whole reason they had gotten close with Quinn in the first place was due to the way Sil saw Quinn. If we don't do this, the bad people will take Quinn away, right? Sil asked. It seemed like he had understood more than he thought. Vorden felt bad for underestimating Sil. Maybe he was slowly getting better, his mind returning to what it once was. Yes, you're right. If we do this, then the bad people won't take Quinn away. With Sil agreeing to help and fight Quinn just in case, they decided to take the job and get the flask. Vorden asked Layla to head back to her hotel room and prepare whatever she thought might help. In her room, there were still a few items she had from Pew that should be able to help block out the cameras around the place. The truth was, Vorden just wanted Layla to leave him alone while he made some preparations of his own. He didn't actually expect her to have some useful things. If there was the chance he was going to fight Quinn, then he needed the strongest powers he could find, and he knew just the place to get them. Inside her hotel room, Layla went under her bed and pulled out what looked like a small metal box. On the front was a keypad where she proceeded to input the code in her mind. Soon, the small metal box was opened, revealing the black ball that was usually in there. This time, though, the black ball looked a little different than before, as a blue flashing light was blinking on the front. This indicated that there had been a message left on it. Placing the blinking black ball on her bed, she chose to ignore it. No, I am no longer a part of Pew or that life. With her palm faced towards the ball, she started to concentrate. Slowly, components of the black ball were being pulled out piece by piece. They were gradually lifted away from the black ball and eventually, the ball stopped blinking. Inside the box, there were still a few more things inside. She quickly grabbed them and placed it in the pouch around her waist. They were special tools that she had been trained with her whole life, although she hadn't used them that much since it was her first mission and she hadn't really been given any tasks. She quickly went to leave the room to meet up with Vorden at their designated spot. But before doing so, she turned around one more time and took a look at the black ball. As she closed the door, she muttered, "Goodbye, Agent 100. Most of the students were still outside enjoying the atmosphere, checking out the stalls and playing all the games. It was busier than the first day because the public had also been invited to check out the place as well. It wasn't too late, and everyone was filled with excitement. However, Vorden was not one of these people. He continuously looked around the area to see if he could find the person he was looking for. Eventually, on his way to his destination, his search had led him back to the block game Quinn had played the other day. There were more people stationed outside, and there was even a large queue. It seemed like the video had made the game go viral. While looking at the line, he could only see students making up the majority of the queue. There were some with high levels on their wristwatch, but he couldn't tell what their abilities were just by looking at them. It was a shame that Big, one of the Sunshield Fire users, was taking part in the fighting tournament. The strongest students currently in the school were all underneath the arena and were in that event. This meant Vorden only had one choice, but had no idea where to find them. However, it looked like luck hadn't given up on him yet, for the girly-looking man who sat by them today was also by the gaming area. Wasn't he one of the 4 leaders, the leader of the Greylash family? Owen, if I remember correctly. Vorden thought. Owen was wearing what looked like a fairly large traditional-looking gown. It covered him from his shoulders and went all the way down to his feet. It was white in color and suited him well, but only made his girly features stand out more. While Vorden was looking in his direction, the 2 pairs of eyes seemed to catch each other, and the man gave a wink. Owen had left the booth of the game he was watching and decided to walk over towards Vorden. Seeing this, Vorden strangely chose to walk away from the premises, up to the ledge where there were next to no people. Oh, he wants me to follow him. Huh. Well, this should be interesting, Owen thought. Owen decided to play along with whatever games the student had, remembering that both he and the other one had reacted strongly after witnessing the video. He had returned to the gaming area tonight, expecting for the student to perhaps return, gaming for he was the one in the video. The other students thought of the same thing, but it looked like that wouldn't be happening. All the other students seemed dull and boring after witnessing the video. As soon as the man had come over, without saying a word, Vorden had gone in for a quick and unsuspected grab. All he needed to do was get in a single touch, and the powers would be copied. It was truly unexpected. Owen had expected that the student only wanted to talk, but his reactions were far quicker than the boys. Releasing that Vorden's intent was not to hurt him, he quickly thought that there must have been some other reason for this strange attack. There was no power behind this strike, and it was too sudden in front of too many people. Owen quickly opened up his gown, and from his waist, he pulled out a metallic fan. He quickly spread it open and blocked Vorden's fingers from touching him. However, Vorden was persistent and tried again with his other hand, but that too was knocked away. Not knowing Vorden's true intentions, Owen stepped back and initiated a small spark in his right hand. It was out of sight for others to see since his body was blocking most of it, plus he had purposely made it very small. It was a warning. If Vorden tried to strike again, he wouldn't hesitate to use his powers. I have no choice, Vorden thought. This is for Quinn. The look in Vorden's eyes suddenly changed, even being felt by Owen. He had never felt such a strong presence come from a student before. He thought that he was right to think those kids from before were interesting. Using the fan, he covered the bright smile on his face. Never before had a student made him feel this way. My name is Vorden Blade from the Blade family. Using my name, I request you to stand down. Answer my request and give me your hand. Upon hearing the words spoken from the student, he now knew it was no laughing matter. The smile he had before dropped in an instant, and as quick as the smile had dropped, so did Owen with his request and gave Vorden his hand. With his sizable white gown and hair covering his face, Owen wasn't very recognizable to the outside people. Unlike the other family leaders, no one knew what he looked like. Today was the first time the newly appointed head was revealed, and that was only found out to the people in the booth. Sure, there were some like Quinn and his group who had paid attention to who was sitting in those seats, but none that knew about the situation. When looking at someone so young, they would have never suspected them of being a leader. The people around outside weren't even paying attention to such a thing that was happening off to the side. They were far too involved in their own things or the gaming center that was close by. After learning about Vorden's true name, he had no choice and gave his hand. The excitement that was felt when following this student now turned into horror. Although his heart was beating rapidly and he was a little scared, there still was a little spark in the back of his mind. I wonder why he needs to borrow my power. His curiosity to find out new and exciting things had always been his downfall. He even felt that his current views were different from the head and those around him. Owen was always interested in the younger generation who was closer to his age. He wanted to know how they felt about the way things were currently run. However, if he was to try to get involved or intervene in a situation like this, it would have possibly been one of the most dangerous things to do. Thank you, Vorden said, letting go of Owen's hand. No matter how interested Owen was, now was not the time to get involved with such a dangerous individual. He took a few steps back and planned to get away, but seeing his actions, Vorden called out to him immediately. Wait, Vorden called out. I want you to take me to where the other leaders are. Hearing this came as a considerable shock to Owen. Was he planning to use their powers too? The Big Four leaders' powers were beyond a level 8 ability. It was to the point where it couldn't be measured. When looking at Vorden, it was clear he was a student, whoever he had trouble with or whoever he needed to deal with. Just his power alone should have been enough. Now the excitement was too much, and he had even forgotten to hide the grin on his face. Maybe the events won't be so boring after all. With no choice, Owen walked, and Vorden followed behind. On the way, they quickly went to one of the stalls to purchase a change of clothing for Vorden. He too was now in a large white gown that was a little too big, as part of the back was dragging along the floor. "Is this really necessary?" he asked. "Of course." Owen chuckled as the two of them continued to walk. Eventually, they had reached their destination. It was a hotel room that was slightly larger and fancier than the rest, Hotel Number 1. This was where all of the higher class members that were invited to the event were staying. The rest had to get a train out to other parts of the city and come in early in the morning. Before entering the building, the two of them stopped outside. "Do you know how to use my powers?" Owen asked. "Not everything, but I should be able to do something," Vorden replied as he started to twirl his hand around. Particular elemental abilities were quite similar in use but reacted differently when being used. An example of this was when gathering water. To gather water and wind, one did the same thing, but water would be a bit harder to control due to the weight and shape of it. When twirling his hand in a circular motion, he tried to imagine the ability as a water one. Suddenly following the palm of his hand, a stream of electric would follow it. He continued to move his hands in a circular motion, and now a full circle of blue electrical light could be seen. "Quick learner as expected," Owen said, impressed. "The kids at our school would cry in horror if they found out you could produce something like that on your first try." Owen then opened up two of his fingers and created a connected spark, passing the blue lightning between his thumb to his finger. "This should do. There is no need to perform what you did before." With the quick lesson over, the two of them walked up to the front of the hotel lobby where the guards were stationed. Owen was allowed to pass, but Vorden was stopped. "That kid is with me. He is a member of the Greylash family," Owen said with a wink towards Vorden. He suddenly realized why now they had the quick lesson before. Opening up his thumb and his index finger, he had presented to the guards the same trick that Owen had shown moments before. There was no better proof that one was part of the Greylash family other than displaying it with their powers. Usually, this wouldn't have been enough, but with one of the Big Four, who was also considered one of the leaders of the current United Earth Alliance, they allowed him to pass. The elevator was taken to one of the top floors, and when they arrived, there were only a few rooms with large doors. These doors all had different decorations on the outside. In the center of the double door going over the parting point was the engraving of the family's crest. No guards, Vorden noticed. This was upon the request of the four themselves. They preferred it this way. Secrecy was a big part of Thea power, and Vorden knew that better than anyone. Right now, they were standing in front of what looked like a large shield with a flame on it. Owen knocked on the door and was quite pleased he would be interacting with Bernie once again. "Those blasted soldiers, I told them not to disturb me. I'm going to have to speak to Owen about this. This treatment is unacceptable." The ramblings of a deep-voiced man could be heard through the doors. It seemed like the man was trying to speak quietly, but he had one of those voices that would be carried and heard throughout no matter what. The doors flew open wide and fast, and in its place was a large, round-bellied man with messy red hair, the trait of the Sunshield family. The instant the doors opened, Bernie's ears started to produce steam at the sight of the man in front of him. "You." He pointed at Owen. "So it looks like you really wanted that fight after all, to come to my room in the middle of the night." He had completely ignored the person standing next to him and continued to focus only on Owen. In case things got ugly, Owen had placed his hand on his metallic fan. Vorden now realized if he was planning to use such a weapon against one of the Big Four, it couldn't have been a regular fan but a high-class beast weapon instead. "As much as I would like to teach you to not judge a book by its cover, I have come for over reasons," Owen tried to explain, but it seemed like Bernie wasn't listening at all. Flames from both of his forearms were slowly starting to appear upward towards his elbow, and a red-hot tribal pattern was shown on his skin. This was something Vorden hadn't seen when he thought with Berg. Is it part of his soul weapon? Realizing this, there was a chance this fight could get serious fast. Owen quickly stepped to the side and presented both of his hands at Vorden. This man is part of the Blade family, and he has asked for our assistance." Hearing the name, Bernie's reaction had immediately changed, just like Owen's. The flames had died down, and the tribal tattoos that went up his arm disappeared as well. Bernie gave the person next to him one look and knew what he wanted instantly, and presented his hand while looking away, making sure not to make eye contact. "If that's all you came for, get out of here. I was just about to take a nice hot bath," Bernie said, but now with a lot less anger in his voice, making sure to not offend the person in front of him. Now, with two of the strongest powers in the world, Vorden was confident he could deal with Quinn. There was no need for him to get the Greylash's power and inform more people that he was here. Her power was to control beasts, and there weren't any around here. Besides, even if there were, it would be too difficult to move and would cause a huge uproar. Then there was only Jack left, the newest addition to the big families. Unlike the other families, it had no history and was only recently created. The others had been going on for generations, even before the war with the Dalki. If Vorden was to ask him for anything, he wasn't even sure he would comply. However, there was another reason. With this much power following through his body, if he was to meet Jack right now, there was a good chance he wouldn't hold back and burnt him to a crisp. It was quite possible it would ignite a war, and that wasn't his decision to make. He wasn't the leader of the Blade family, and if they found out he was abusing their name like this, even he could get into trouble. "I don't have to tell you guys that I was never here," Vorden said. "But before I go, I need one more thing. Is there a place or spot I can use where no one will know if I'm using these powers?" Bernie huffed out a puff of hot air before answering. "There is. I often use it to cool down once in a while. They created the room with me in mind. And of course, there are no cameras. Even if they were, everything would have been burnt by now. It's an empty room with nothing inside, and the walls are soundproof. Whatever you're planning to do in there, nobody will be able to tell. It's a place only permitted to be used by us. It was something I had to fight hard for them to make." "Perfect," Vorden replied. The two leaders had scary thoughts in their mind at what possibly could Vorden need the room for, and why did he need the two of their powers, but they didn't ask and only told Vorden where to go. Down the hotel lobby, the two boys, Fex and Logan, were heading towards Logan's room. After finding out about the plan, Logan was happy to hear that his time hadn't been wasted. He informed Fex that plenty of things in his room might have been of great use to them. During the walk to Logan's room, it was a quiet one, though. The two boys were hardly left alone with each other, and their first meeting was quite an eventful one. Fex didn't hold any hard feelings about Logan blasting him across the room, but thought that Logan might have felt wrong about it. However, Logan hadn't even thought about the situation even once before. The reason for his silence was just because he wasn't much of a talker when he wanted to be. When he had something to say, he would speak all out, explaining every little detail. But most of the time, he wouldn't be speaking, spending all his time thinking about things inside his head. Still, Fex couldn't think of a better person who would be able to help him with this task. He had seen how helpful he was during the True Dream plan, and he needed his smarts. The two of them entered Logan's room, and Fex's eyes opened wide at what he could see. Unlike the other places, Logan seemed to be quite different from the rest. "Is all this stuff yours?" Fex asked, still looking around the room in amazement. "I know. It's a shame I couldn't bring more stuff with me. But at least I don't feel uncomfortable with all this around," Logan said as he proceeded to head to his desk. The room looked like it had been completely converted. Each student was given the same size room, and the layout of the rooms was the same. Yet Logan, somehow, in the short time here, had managed to transform the whole place into a miniature version of his own room back at the academy. The desk was now filled with a laptop that had multiple gadgets and wires attached to it. The room had several other gadgets and chests around and about in different room areas, and digital maps and other things were displayed on the wall. He then further realized that Logan had only just been knocked out of the tournament and spent very little time in the room. There were so many questions that Fex wanted to ask, but there wasn't enough time. "I'm not sure if you knew, but if you didn't pick me to help you break Peter out from the underground arena, then I was going to volunteer anyway," Logan said as he pulled up a 3D model of the floor directly underneath the arena. "I wasn't too bothered about the event, I'm sure you know, but I was concerned about Peter. In case Quinn or the others changed their mind, I tried to find a way to help Peter escape. When trying to find a way from the dungeon, it was impossible for me as I had no clue what it looked like. But with the underground arena, I was able to explore and keep track of the guards and everyone's attention personally. I came up with a plan, but there was still a problem. Even if we could get Peter out, what do we do then? They would soon notice and prepare a search for him. We're in the middle of Military Base 1, and we know where nothing is. With nowhere for him to go, breaking him out would be useless and would only further get us into trouble. It seems like my research will be put into use after all. I'm assuming you, or whoever was planning to take you already has a plan to leave this place. Logan then proceeded to show and explain to Fex all the small details. Logan had kept track of where each camera was positioned and its range of motion. He even had the guard's schedule planned in his head, the one standing by the events as well as the two that were always by Peter's side. The level of detail was incredible, and when looking around the room, he noticed there had been an immense amount of research that had been put into trying to get Peter out of the dungeon as well. I guess he means a lot to you. A true friend, huh? Fex said. Logan thought about this for a while. I guess, Logan replied. After meeting Quinn, I have made a few companions, but Peter was more than a friend. He was an assistant, and it would be hard for me to find an assistant as good as him. Fex was slightly confused by Logan's words. He couldn't imagine Peter being a good assistant, but soon released based on Logan's personality. Peter was probably the best one for him. Never asked any questions, remained silent most of the time, never went to sleep, and would do as asked. In a way, Peter was like a robot, and the only thing Logan was surrounded by most of the time were tech-like things. A robot would be the perfect assistant. With the plan and all the details ready, Logan left the room but not before erasing all the details off his computer. He then walked over to the corner of the room and pulled out a small metallic box. Once opening the package, inside were 6 different masks that covered the bottom part of one's face. He then walked over and presented the masks to Fex. What's this? Fex asked. Do you remember Quinn's mask? While making his, we went through a few prototypes. It was a waste to throw them away, so I decided to keep them and made some enhancements. The masks can communicate with each other as well as be used as a voice changer. It will be used to keep our identity hidden. Looking down at the mask, he could see there were indeed plenty of designs, and that's when he noticed there was one that looked a little like a bull. It suited him well, especially since he had ham still. I'll take this one. The two placed the masks in their back pocket as they left the hotel room one more time and headed for the elevators. Once inside, they headed down to the first floor and were patiently waiting in the lobby for the next part of their plan. This was important as the timing had to be perfect. When the guards would change shift, this was their moment to get Peter out. The two went over to a table that had several sofas placed around it. It was starting to get late now, so fewer and fewer people were beginning to pass through the hotel lobby area. Once again, the two of them seemed to be sitting in silence, and it was starting to drive Fex a little crazy. They still had a good 20 minutes before they had to make their move, and he was wondering if he could last that long without saying anything. However, surprisingly, Logan was the first one to speak to Fex. I assume you know a lot of VS. Yes, originally being from there and all. Logan asked. VS. Fex replied, then soon releasing what it stood for. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yes, I know a lot. Why? Do you know any that seem to have an interest in computer systems of the sort? Or advanced in technology, perhaps even obsessed? Logan asked. After meeting both Fex and Quinn, he could tell there was a clear difference. When handing the mask over to Fex, Logan made sure to make contact, yet no message appeared like the one that had happened when touching Quinn. This meant that the system seemed to be unique to Quinn. Logan was looking for answers to his questions and possibly thought there was a chance he could find out who created the book Quinn had been given. Whoever had made such a system, it was way beyond anything they currently had. Honestly, the technology VS use is a little bit more advanced than what you have, but at the same time, it feels old. It's kind of hard to explain. I guess VS are quite traditional in a sense, so some are against using technology to better their lives, but we have to rely on it in some cases. Because of this, I don't know anyone specifically who is interested in technology, apart from a few of the young ones like me. Fex replied, interesting. But then who created all your technological advancements if they are more advanced than what we currently have? Logan asked. Fex started to laugh nervously as he had never really thought about these types of things before. He just took the stuff he had for granted without thinking much about it. I'll be honest, I have no clue. But when you asked about obsessiveness, it does remind me about a story the others used to tell me. You see, just like your head generals of each military base, we also have leaders or council members. 13 to be precise, and number 10 was always known to be, well, a bit crazy. Although he wasn't obsessed with the technology, he was obsessed with magic. His powers were unique even for vampires, and I heard some of the vampires' advancements were due to him. But honestly, other than that, I don't know much at all. I'm still young for a vampire, and this was all past my time. It was a long shot, but it was the only thing Logan could go off. Perhaps if he ever obtained more information about vampires in the future, he could look into this 10th council member more. Just then, they heard a beep from their watches, indicating it was time for them to move. As soon as the timer had gone off, a few little spiders started falling down to the ground from underneath Logan's sleeve. The two boys continued their fake conversation with hand gestures and such. So, what's your favorite sandwich? Fex asked, trying to make the conversation look a tad bit more realistic by asking a real question. However, Logan looked as if he was really struggling to decide his answer. He placed his hand on his chin and looked up into a corner. I would probably have to say cheese and onion. But since my body doesn't deal with cheese that well, I guess if we were talking about favorites, then it would depend on my cravings at the time. Regarding how the question is phrased, the best sandwich differs. Do you mean the best tasting? Best one for your health? Or perhaps the best ingredients? I guess you can tell me all three then. Fex's tone had a nervous vibe to it, as he wasn't expecting a real answer back. The spiders had now fanned out, and once they had completed their tasks, they reported back to the server, namely, Logan. In the middle of their intense conversation, Logan suddenly stopped and stood up. Let's go. The underground arena was accessible from any hotel room. It was designed this way so when contestants were eliminated, they could easily rejoin with their military base. This meant that each of the elevators were in some way linked. One would usually require a pass to go to the lower floors, but that wasn't a problem to worry about. Not for Logan anyway. They continued walking through the lobby and headed towards the elevator area. Fex glanced at the camera in the corner and could see a spider falling from it before rejoining back up with Logan. Once the doors opened, they both stepped in. The cameras within and outside the elevators weren't able to capture their figures. The cameras were set to loop footage for 2 minutes. Once the time was up, it would then begin showing the live feed. It was currently nighttime, and there were no other contestants that would be making their way from the underground up to the lobby. Once they were past these cameras, there would be no more problems since there were no other cameras in the underground section. Logan could assume this was due to the same reason why there weren't any cameras at the school. Many students would be practicing their abilities. Their families simply wouldn't allow them to spy and gather information by looking at what the students were doing. While in the elevator, the two of them placed both their masks over their face. So far, everything's going well, Fex confidently commented. Now, Vorden, Layla, it's all up to you. Without the blood, everything they were doing was pointless. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Vorden told Layla to meet him just outside of the number 1 military hotel building. He even informed her that he found a place and everything was ready. All she needed to do now was bring Quinn over to the destination. Since he already told her of his plan beforehand, there was no need for her to use her tools. There would be no cameras inside when Quinn entered the room with Vorden. Her job there was to be the lookout. Although only members from the Big Four could use the room, that didn't mean they themselves wouldn't. However, there was still the slight chance that Mona, Bree, or Jack would try to use it. Bernie had informed Vorden that this was extremely unlikely. In all the years the place had been built, it was never once used by them. In fact, he reckoned that he was the only one to have ever used the place. She stood outside Quinn's door and took a deep breath before raising her hand to knock. It felt like the work she was doing now was more like the double agent type stuff back when she was in Pure. These were the things that she had been trained to do. It seemed a little funny that she was still using it despite already leaving them. Okay, let's do this. Just as Layla was about to tap the door with her knuckles, it suddenly opened. Layla, what are you doing here this late? Quinn asked her. But, how? She started asking questions in her mind. How did he know someone was by the door? Oh, you don't need to worry. I could smell you were coming, Quinn responded. Smell? These words stung her a bit. She was tempted to lift her arms up to see if she really did smell that bad. Upon seeing that, she felt somehow insulted. Quinn realized that what he said just now could have been easily misinterpreted. No, I didn't mean that you smell. I meant like, you smell great, he said while blushing. You know, because of my sensitive nose and all. The both of them left the room and headed outside towards the military base once Layla said that she wanted to walk for a bit and that she had something important to say. Quinn thought that he already knew what the subject would be. It had to be about Fex's confession. As the two of them were walking, they felt a little awkward because of their previous conversation at the door. Quinn didn't know what to say to make it up to her. While pondering over this matter, Quinn had fallen back a little and was walking just behind Layla. He noticed that he was staring at her from behind a lot more than usual. Due to this, he started to think back about what Fex said, about how he wanted to inform him beforehand since he assumed that there was something going on between the two of them. And now, Layla asked to have a private conversation with him as well. No, it can't be. Does Layla like me? When she asked him to tame her, did she mean something else by it? His mind couldn't help but have these kinds of thoughts. If Layla likes me, and Fex likes her, then that means, oh no, I'm in a love triangle. If she's here to confess to me, then what do I say? I can't say yes to her. I can't do this to Fex. While his mind wandered about in this confused and crazy contemplation, the both of them eventually arrived outside a small building behind the hotel. Although it was very plain-looking, it was also large at the same time. This reminded Quinn of the storage room where he first found the shadow ability. He wondered why Layla chose this place to converse with him. He could only guess it was due to it being away from everyone else. Layla then turned around and faced him. It looked as if she wanted to say something, but was also struggling on how to say it. I know what you want to talk about. Quinn decided to initiate the discussion. He didn't want the situation to be more awkward than it already was. This is about Fex, isn't it? How does he know? She was surprised once again. Feeling a bit contemplated, she started to speak. Look, Quinn. You don't need to say any more. However, Quinn suddenly interrupted her. Quinn, Vorden is waiting for you inside, she blurted out before things really got out of hand. Wait, Vorden? How is he involved in all of this? Quinn was now truly confused about what was going on. Look, I just felt bad about lying, saying that I needed to speak to you. The truth is, Vorden said that he wanted to talk to you. He's inside waiting. Layla then walked over to the metallic-looking doors and inputted the code that Vorden told her. It really was nearly the same storage room back on the red portal planet. At first, Quinn moved to the entrance, but he stopped just outside of it. Could he really trust Layla? Because he didn't know what was going on, Quinn was starting to think that this was possibly a trap set up by Pure. Perhaps Layla was planning to double-cross him and was still working with them. Is Vorden really inside here? Quinn turned around and asked while looking at her. At that moment, a hand suddenly pulled him from behind. Just get in here, you idiot. Vorden's voice suddenly piped up. He shuffled both him and Quinn inside as the doors shut-closed. When the motion sensor lights automatically turned on, they could both see that they were in a large plain white room. There were no windows around. There was nothing except the door they just entered from. When Quinn turned around and saw Vorden, his worries settled down since it seemed like Layla was telling the truth. The look on Vorden's face was not one which greeted a friend, but instead, it was of concern. In just an instant, his expression changed. Vorden now had the friendliest smile that Quinn had ever seen. Hey, Vorden, are you okay? Quinn couldn't help but ask. Vorden. He responded while tilting his head to the side and placing his finger on his lips. No, I'm not Vorden. Did you forget my name? He responded with a question. This strange reaction made Vorden look almost like a handsome blonde-haired puppy. What's going on? Quinn thought. He was quite baffled. It seemed like all of his friends were acting strange recently. And I'm meant to be the weird one in our group. Don't you remember? We met before. I'm Sil. There were two outcomes between the situation with Vorden and Quinn. In Vorden's head, the best outcome would be for him to ask Quinn to put his blood in the flask kindly. If Quinn were to question why, he would simply tell him to trust him, and he would inform him about the details tomorrow. However, knowing Quinn, he would try to get involved some way or another. On top of that, he would try following him. If the first part of the plan worked, then Vorden would hand the flask to Layla while keeping an eye on Quinn, making sure he didn't leave the room until everything was done. Hopefully, this would all lead to avoiding him fighting with Quinn. Then again, Vorden was someone who always needed to prepare himself for all of the possible scenarios. There was a good chance that when asking for his blood, Quinn wouldn't do so without saying why, leading him to forcefully take the blood. In both cases, these would lead to a fight. If this was to happen, Vorden wanted the fight to be over as quickly as possible, which meant he would need to utilize both of the abilities. The second Vorden had pushed Quinn into the room. He had made the switch with Sil, so if anything were to happen, they would be ready. Okay, so remember what we've planned? Vorden asked, standing right next to him. Sil was currently in the seat and Rayton was standing a little bit further away from them with a smile. If you think for a second that this will go the way you expect it to go, then you're crazy, Rayton said out loud with a little chuckle, waiting for disaster to strike. Repeat after me. I need you to trust me, Quinn, and I need you to do me a favor. I don't want you to ask why, but I need some of your blood, said Vorden. However, the words were simply ignored as Sil decided to do his own thing. But I'm not Vorden. Did you forget my name? I'm Sil, he said outward, looking at Quinn. Hearing Vorden speak, it seemed a little strange to Quinn. Although it sounded like him, at the same time, it didn't. The emphasis on certain words, as well as the fluctuations in his voice, were just a tad off. Not just that, but the way he was currently standing. Everything just felt wrong. And now he was saying his name was Sil? What are you doing, Sil? Vorden could not help but shout. He can't find out about you. Sil turned his head and looked at Vorden behind him before responding. Shut up. I can do what I want. It's my body anyway. Vorden gulped as he took a step back. There was nothing he could do when Sil got like this. So he decided to just wait and see the outcome. It's been a while since we've last met. Sil giggled. Let me ask you something. Are we friends? There was a brief pause as Quinn was trying to figure out just what was going on. Of course we are, Vorden, Quinn replied. Sil shook his head rapidly back and forth as he stomped his feet in a peculiar manner. At the same time, flames from his feet rose into the air before dissipating. No, he yelled. Not Vorden. I already told you. I'm Sil. Seeing a fire ability appear all of a sudden made Quinn take a few steps back. He knew this power belonged to one of the big four, so he could not help but wonder why Vorden currently had it. Something strange was happening here. Sil, why does Vorden keep referring to himself as Sil? While thinking of this, Quinn started to think about the possibilities. Did Pure get to him, or has someone with a mind control ability taken over Vorden's body? Perhaps, it might have even been a vampire. He didn't fully understand the capabilities of the vampires, so he thought this might have been their way to try and get rid of him once they found out. Whatever the case was, it was clear that the person in front of him right now wasn't the Vorden he knew. Why are you stepping back? Sil said as he reached out his hand. Don't be scared. Why are you scared? Suddenly, tears started to flow from his eyes. They ran down his cheek before trickling to the ground. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. He continued to mumble as he looked at Quinn. Please don't be scared, Kesa. I promise I will never hurt you again. Although the words spoken were quiet, with Quinn's hearing, he could hear every word. He heard him speak of a name, which he did not know of. Please, Sil, Vorden yelled, trying one more time to reach out to him. He knew that if this went on, perhaps Quinn would be seriously hurt. The goal was only to get his blood and nothing more. Quinn is not Kesa. We need him. We are here to help him, right? You don't want him to go, so just ask for the blood. Making sure to not be too pushy, this was all that he could do while he silently prayed. The words had gotten through to him, as Sil saw the worried look on his face. He grabbed his hand and placed it towards his chest while wiping his tears away with the other. "Is right. You are not Kesa." Looking up, he gave a smile. "Please remember my name next time. It's Sil. Since we're friends, I need to ask you for a favor." Sil then went to his side and pulled out the metallic flask that had been given to him by Fex. "I need you to fill this up with your blood." Looking at the flask, Quinn noticed it in an instant. That was because it was the same one that he had been gifted with by Fex. This was a deciding factor in his mind. The vampires must have gotten to Vorden. Somehow, they had found out. It was probably the reason why Fex had been acting strangely before. He now felt stupid for believing such an obvious lie. Did he betray me? Quinn pondered. Perhaps, when he asked Quinn to leave that day, the vampires came and surrounded his friends. After that, they forced them to complete this task. He didn't know why they needed his blood, but he still had a lot to learn about vampires in the first place. Then again, there was the possibility that they couldn't kill him outright due to him actually being one of the leaders. Still, whatever the case was, Quinn wasn't going to go down without a fight. "I'm sorry. I can't," Quinn replied. "And Vorden, I don't know how, but I promise I'll save you." With nothing left to say, Quinn activated his shadow quip ability. Dark shadows quickly covered his arms and legs, as well as his new chest piece in the center. He then quickly charged forward and left the clouds of shadows behind. But right now, his body was all of his equipment. "I know how strong you are, Vorden. Hence the reason why I can't go easy on you. Activate Wind Walk." Skill Daze. Daze failed. "Quick, Sil. Take him out now." Vorden shouted. Sil quickly curled up, bringing his arms and head towards his chest. He then gathered the power of the fire energy around the center. Soon, little flames could be seen on top of all his clothing. Slowly, they started to burn away even at the fire-resistant school uniform. The firepower was too strong. As Quinn started to get closer, he could sense something was up. Shadow control. Lifting up the shadow in front of him, he made sure to have it ready, prepared as a shield for whatever was to come. Once Vorden attacked, that's when Quinn would strike using his blood abilities. At the moment, he still hadn't used his blood bank, nor his own flask, so his HP was low. This was another reason for him wanting to finish off the fight fast. Enough time had passed, and Sil was ready. He suddenly extended his hands and head outward like a spring, causing a dome of fire to be released outward, heading in all directions. There was nothing Quinn could do but brace himself with his shadow. As the outer edge of the fire dome grew closer, it had finally hit his shadow. MC Cell 0. As soon as the fire had touched Quinn's shadow, it had disappeared in an instant, consuming all of his MC cells. This could have only meant one thing. The attack was just too powerful. Whose fire ability did he copy? Quinn thought. However, the shadow was able to cause a small crack in the dome, allowing him to pass through and come out of the attack unharmed. But now, with no more MC cells, he could no longer rely on his shadow ability, only leaving him with his blood abilities. "It seems I have no choice. I have to use my blood bank. I'll just curb my addiction next time." But before he could even do that, a blue stream of light flashed before his eyes, and Sil, who was on the other side of the room, was now directly in front of him. "Go to sleep, my dear Quinn," Sil said as he placed his hand on top of Quinn's head and unleashed a fury of electricity through his body. His body shook rapidly back and forth as the electricity passed through. He gritted his teeth, trying to take the pain, but it was too much for him as his vision slowly faded to black. 195th HP. "You are being knocked out." As Sil let go of Quinn's head, he allowed his body to drop to the floor. Standing inside the small room looking at Peter directly in front of them, Fex couldn't believe it. They had successfully and quickly managed to make their way to Peter's room with no trouble at all. This type of thing could have only been done with extensive research, and Fex looked at Logan in even more amazement now. For Logan, his plan turned out better than he thought. Everything was easier than it would have been anywhere else, and the reason was that the military had kept to the same routine down to the last second. There were a few variables that Logan had planned out for but expected that he might not have needed them. When walking through certain hallways, and through the rooms, everything had turned out as he had expected. Still, he had kept his spiders out to watch just in case. If they had made any changes to their routine, the spiders would have been able to see and inform him beforehand. There was only one tricky part of the whole operation, and that was due to the room Peter was in. To keep an eye on Peter, he had been placed in a separate section compared to everyone else. A room made just for him that was void with contact to the outside. On top of this, 2 guards were to be stationed by the door. This was better for both Fex and Quinn. The military had expected an attack from the outside. The easiest time to attack would be during the event when the soldiers were busy and spread thin. If they caused a panic, they would be too busy with dealing with the public than dealing with the attack. They were confident in their measures and never expected someone from the inside to do anything. Their main concern was with others or the students seeing them, so this was better for them altogether. The 2 guards who were stationed at the front door were where Fex would come into play. The 2 of them stood just around the corner from Peter's room silently as they waited for the answer from above. As soon as Vorden had successfully knocked out Quinn, they would act. If not, they would turn around and abandon the whole thing. They needed to wait because the only thing they could do at this point was to knock out the 2 guards in front of them and take Peter away. Logan had timed everything, so the shift change had just happened. No one would find their beaten bodies for another hour, which meant they needed to take Peter to Silver within the time frame. Then a message had been received from above. He did it, and a lot quicker than I thought, Logan said, surprised. From around the corner of the corridor, 2 spiders were released once again. They scaled up the wall and went above on the ceiling. They walked until they were just above the 2 soldiers' heads. "You ready?" Logan asked as he could see Fex was fiddling with a string in his hand. This string was different from the usual type he would use. When Fex used his abilities before, it would always be nearly invisible to the eye, but this string was dyed red like blood. The ability had been infused with his vampire blood abilities to make it several times stronger. The only problem was it took some preparation time to use. This was why he was unable to use it against the King Tier beast before. At the same time, he had already deemed it would be useless, for the King Tier beast was far too strong. Still, for situations like this, it was perfect. When Fex was finally ready, he gave the nod, and at the same time the spiders fell down hovering above the neck of the guards. Both of them felt something ticklish on their neck. One soldier tired slapping it, while another turned around trying to fling whatever was on him. This small distraction was all that was needed for Fex to whip out his blood-red strings. Quickly they wrapped around their mouths like a spider web, before wrapping around their legs and pulling them to the ground. Then finally, their whole arms and legs had been covered. They tried to break free from the strings, but it was nearly impossible for them. The spiders continued to move along their body, as it scanned for any traces of equipment that could give them away. The only thing that was found was a tracker that had been placed along with an alert button. However, the alert hadn't been pressed, so it was best to leave everything as it was for now. The 2 of them entered the room, and they could see Peter standing there still. He had heard the commotion outside and was wondering just what was going on, but he had never expected to see these 2. Peter had already given up hope on being saved. "I never expected you to save me," Peter said. "Don't thank us yet, until you hear what we have to say. And it's not good news." Fex replied. Back above ground, Vorden had now switched back with Sil. He had just sent a report to the others to proceed with what they were doing. He hadn't extracted the blood yet, as Fex had given him a warning and they needed to wait for the timing. He knew that Quinn was currently going through getting rid of his addiction. Fex never knew about the connection Vorden had and never expected him to be able to get powers so powerful. He had hoped with Quinn going through the addiction, he would be weak enough to the point where it was easier for him to be knocked out, and it seemed like it had worked. There were many times when Vorden had watched Quinn. He appeared to have been given 2 or 3 chances, as if he had more lives than one, but this time that hadn't happened. However, this also meant there was a chance that during the fight, Quinn would be close to turning into a bloodsucker. He had been informed that there should be a flask similar on Quinn's body. Vorden searched and found an exact replica. The next step was to wait patiently for the others to get back to him, or until there were signs that Quinn was starting to change. "We have successfully gotten Peter. We're coming up now," Logan said. Everything seemed to have fallen into place. Layla had entered the room and was now standing by Quinn's side, both of them looking at Quinn's body. "How do you think he will react when he wakes up?" Layla asked. "I think he'll be pissed, but he will understand. He will soon realize if he was in our shoes, he would have done the same thing." Vorden replied, as he pulled out a small little dagger and proceeded to cut Quinn on the arm. Blood started seeping from the wound and fell into the flask. "Do you think this is right? Aren't we just sacrificing one life for another?" Layla asked. "Don't forget, Peter had already been caught by the military. There was nothing we could do. This solves both our problems. They never find out about the vampires, and for a short while it will get the vampires off our back. 095 HP. Our bloodlust is at its maximum. You are now transforming." The standard messages would appear, even though Quinn wasn't conscious. Suddenly, as the flask was filled, Quinn's body started to jolt up and down as it began to shake. Vorden knew what this was straight away. He quickly handed over the flask with Quinn's blood to Layla. He then grabbed the other flask that was on Quinn's body. He held his mouth open with one hand while pouring it all in with the other. A few moments later, and the shaking had stopped. The veins and muscles that were bulging had calmed down, and it looked like everything was safe for now. Multiple blood types has been consumed. Calculating stat increases. Ooh. "Hey, take this as well," Vorden said, handing over the second flask. "Fex said for Quinn to keep it, but I'm afraid it might only bring us more trouble in the future. Give it back to him. Don't worry about me and just go," Vorden shouted. Before leaving, she took one look at Quinn. There was a good chance that his current life now would be hers. Always running away. But still, at least Quinn isn't following anyone. He chose to do things his own way. With that, she ran off out of the building. "Don't wake up, Quinn," Vorden said. "It's for your own good." Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Outside, the two boys had returned with Peter. They had given him one of the masks to wear for now in case the other students outside would see him. Although it was pretty late now, and nearly all of the students had already returned to their rooms, Layla came running out towards them. As they met on the platform a little away from Military Hotel 2, she could see the three boys in their masks, and she had to admit, it looked a little intimidating. The masks had a scary look to them in their designs and made them all appear as demons. "Do you have the blood?" Fex asked. "It's right here," Layla said, handing over the flask. She then quickly pulled out the second one and handed it to him as well. "Vorden said he knows you mean well, but there's a chance others could come looking for it." Fex wanted to say no. He wanted Quinn to at least have something to remember him by when he left. This was a gift, but at the same time, he would just be selfish otherwise if he insisted. It was true. If humans found the flask, there was a good chance he would be investigated. He took the two flasks and then grabbed Peter by the arm. "Tell Quinn he doesn't have to worry about the vampires. There are no vampires stationed at Military Base 2, nor are there any at the other military bases now. Once I leave with Peter, he will have nothing to worry about for a good while. I don't have the time to say goodbye to you all, and neither does Peter. I wish you all good luck in the future," Fex said, as he grabbed Peter and took off into the distance. A cloud of mist seemed to encase the two of them, and when the mist had settled, they no longer could be seen. Layla and Logan didn't even have the chance to even say their final words. "You know, when Fex first came I kind of hated him, especially with everything he did to Erin," Layla said. "But he really was never a bad guy. I'm going to miss that idiot. It will certainly feel weird without him and my assistant. Good luck to you two as well," Logan said. Before they had left Peter's room, both Fex and Vorden had updated Peter on the whole situation. They informed him of the plan and troubles that came with it. Without hesitation, after being told what needed to be done, Peter had agreed. After hearing this was all for Quinn's sake. He was happy he would actually be of some help to his creator and savior. However, the sudden response seemed strange, Fex thought. Sure, whites were loyal to their creators, but not like this. One would have to command an order and be forced to do so due to the bond of blood. But Peter seemed to have been so accepting over the whole thing. "I can't guarantee what will happen to you when they find out," Fex said. "You could be killed." The words spoken were trying to deter him. "It's okay," Peter replied. "Better than being left in the hands of the humans." Besides, if I stayed, there's a good chance they would find out about all of you, and I wouldn't want anything to happen. Hearing these words had put a smile on Vorden's face. Peter, you really did change for the better. And I don't think it's just cause you're a white now, said Vorden. When you first evolved, you seemed cruel and distant, but those words right there, they didn't come from the white version of you or the old Peter. Right now, I see a new man. Hearing Vorden's words just confirmed Fex's strange thoughts further. Whites were relatively short-tempered and evil in nature. Sure, Peter had shown this a few times, but it wasn't to the degree of whites that he knew. Perhaps this was the influence of Quinn's will on the creator. It was a shame as it seemed to be progressing slowly. Peter started to change away from the standard white. Let's go, Fex said. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. After parting ways from the others, Peter was taken to a safe, secluded place out on the platform, away from the meeting point with Silver, as well as away from the others. The masks were now returned, and right now, Peter had transformed his face to look like Quinn. If anyone were to see the two of them, they would just think they were nothing more than two students having a laugh. There was no chance for someone else to spot Quinn either, as Vorden was keeping an eye on him in the special training room. Do you hate me? Fex asked. No, Peter replied instantly but gave nothing more back. I hate me, Fex said. You know, I thought I might get attached to this place and hate to go back home. What I didn't expect was that I would get attached to the people rather than the place. I can't help but think that they all had to go through this just because of my selfish wants. The vampires would have come for Quinn anyway, Peter replied. What do you mean by that? Fex asked. There was no reason to send any of the vampires to the military base. They had only come out to search for him. Peter hadn't replied because he didn't know why the vampires would come after Quinn. All he knew was before. Quinn would often say that it seemed like for some reason he was trying to get stronger as fast as possible, as if he was preparing for a threat ahead. Oh, I think I know, Fex said, giving his own answer and coming to his own conclusion as usual. It had to be something to do with the shadow powers. There was a good chance that Quinn's master was part of the old Punishers, if they were still around. If the others knew about this, they certainly would send people after him. Even if Quinn's master wasn't a Punisher, the others would want to get their hands on Quinn's power for themselves and find out which family was in charge of Quinn. I never did find out the truth behind him. Fex at first was very curious, but soon felt bad about trying to find details of what he would now call a friend back, that it just felt wrong and was in his nature to do things like that. Hey, take this, Fex said as he handed the flask over to Peter. After opening the lid, Peter gulped down the whole drink in one go and suddenly had a strange feeling in his chest. Asterisk bump. Asterisk bump. It was something he hadn't felt in a while, and it was all a little alien to him. The sound, my heart, it's beating again. As the blood fell down his throat and reached his heart, strange energy was felt all around. The blood was now being pumped from the heart all over the body. He could feel it moving through his veins. It felt as if his insides were on fire. For anyone else, it would be a painful experience, but for Peter, it was a joy. For it was the first time he had felt pain in a while. What is this? Peter asked. It's your master's blood. Usually, there would be no reason to do this to a white. Their strengths are the fact that they can't feel pain. If anything, this makes you seem more human. Anyway, don't be too happy. The effects are temporary. Fex explained. Our powers come from our blood, and right now, Quinn's power is inside you. Right now, the feeling, the smell, and even the look. With all this, I wouldn't be able to tell who I was looking at. As in terms of powers, although your attacks and such will be healthy, you still can't produce any blood attacks like we are. Also, I would urge you not to fight or test out any of your powers. At most, I see this lasting a week. Day by day, the power will slowly start to fade, and sooner or later, they will find out. If you start using that extra strength of yours, it will only go away quicker. Fex then took a deep breath as he started to walk off to one of the military bases. Leave all the talking to me. Once again, Silver was waiting patiently on top of the roof of Building 4. In her hand was a rectangular-looking device that looked identical to the one in Logan's room. It was a portable teleporter. She had trust that her brother would complete the task. Although he was a fool, he wasn't one to break promises. When he said he would finish it, she already knew he would get it done. "You're hey," she said, as two figures jumped up from the side. "Oh," Silva replied, seeing that the person she had brought with them was still fully conscious. "As you requested, this is the vampire who had made it illegal. I had been tailing him a while and explained everything had happened. When I told him that a vampire knight was here to catch him, he immediately turned himself in, knowing there was no need to fight." A vampire knight, a class that was designated just below the vampire leader. It was a unique role as each family was able to designate only 2 vampires in their family. They would mostly be in charge of running things or giving orders if the vampire leader wasn't present. Because of this, to be able to be elected into such a position, one would need a strong power to keep the others in the line. Seeing the beautiful women in front of him, Peter felt nothing. Yet, for some reason, that seemed to worry him even more. When he had first encountered Fex, his wild energy could be felt throughout. One could tell he was strong. But with Silva, it was calm. It was as if she wasn't even there, yet clearly she stood right in front of him. "And what of the illegal?" she asked. "I have taken care of him and gotten rid of the body, but since he and this one are registered students, they will soon find out about them. I suggest we leave as soon as possible." Silva walked over to Fex slowly. The sound of her boots hitting the floor was heard. Everything had been prepared for this moment, and he had answered perfectly. Now he just needed her to believe him. However, he was too afraid and didn't want to look up for even a second. Suddenly, he felt a hand on his hair. Silva ruffled it up and gave it a little pat. "You have done well, little brother. I will tell the family of your good deeds here, and they shall lighten the punishment." The square portal device was placed on the ground, and a unique digital number was imputed. The contraption started to open itself up slowly piece by piece until it had finally connected. Fex quickly tied up Peter's hand behind his back with his string ability and pulled him along. "Goodbye, everyone," he said in his head as he stepped through the portal, with Peter following from behind. Soon after, Silva threw a small circular ball on the floor and stepped through herself. The small circular ball started to blink red and made a beeping sound. The blinking along with the sound started to get faster until asterisk bang. The ball had exploded, destroying everything in a 2-meter radius. Including the portal, no one would be able to follow their traces to the vampire's home. Slowly it seemed like Quinn was coming to. A few grunts were heard here and there as he started to lift himself off the floor. He felt pain in the inside of his body, which was a strange feeling, but the outside of his body had mostly healed from the attack as well. When he had opened his eyes, he was greeted with several messages that had appeared while he was knocked out. 5095 HP. Hunger has diminished. Transformation has been cancelled. Multiple blood types consumed. Stat points allocated. 4 free stat points remaining. Quinn quickly tried to get his head around what the messages had meant and tried to remember his last moments. Suddenly, he started to remember he was in the middle of a fight, and it was with Vorden. It hadn't lasted for long. The only thing he could guess was that he had been knocked. Transformation cancelled. I see it's all starting to make sense now. I must have been knocked out in the middle of the fight. I was low on HP in the first place and started to transform. The stat increase and the HP regain must have been from the blood in the flask. When Quinn had found out he was getting addicted, he decided to stop consuming blood daily. However, he soon realized that it didn't mean he had to stop collecting blood from different students. After placing one of the students' blood in the flask, he later collected other students' blood and placed it into the container. When his HP was low enough, he would consume the flask with all the blood in it, giving him a boost in stats as well as helping him get rid of his addiction. Status, stats. Strength, 26. Agility, 27. Stamina, 21. Charm, 28. He had also obtained 4 more free stat points to be used wherever he wished. I'll continue to place it into Charm for now, he thought. The reason for this was no student's blood type would directly increase the Charm stat like the others. On top of this, currently, he knew of and had found no equipment that did such a thing either. While all the other stats still had the benefit of higher tier equipment, his plan had significantly worked. As long as he had the flask, he could continue to do this without addiction to blood. He reached around his side and went to grab the flask. Right now he felt so overjoyed that he wanted to grab it and kiss it. Where's the flask? Quinn thought as he panicky started to grab around his waist, but could find nothing. So you're finally awake, Vorden said, making sure that he was a few feet away. He didn't know how Quinn would react about the whole thing and made sure to keep his distance. Hearing the voice made Quinn spring up into his feet, and instantly he got into a fighting stance. Shadow Eek. Wait. It's me. I was the one that gave you the blood. Quinn calmed down. What's your name? Quinn asked. I'm Vorden. It's me, Quinn. Remember, we went to the red portal planet together, and you turned into that bloodsucker? If you want proof, I can even go into detail about how you ate. Stop. I believe you, Quinn said, not wanting Vorden to remind of what had happened back then. What happened to you? Vorden, was it you that attacked me? Was it pure? What's going on? Quinn asked. Do you remember a while ago when I said if there were some things you found out about me, I would have to kill you? Vorden replied. At the time, it probably seemed like a joke, but I was quite serious. There are some secrets that even I have, Quinn, but that's not important right now. What do you mean it's not important right now? Quinn shouted back. You, or Sil, or whoever it was just fried my ass. There's something you need to know. It's about Peter and Fex. I promise I'll explain everything. The trust between the two of them had been partially broken, and Vorden could see that. So he made sure to stay a few feet away from Quinn while explaining the details of what had happened and why. What Fex's part in all of this was and what his part of it was as well. Once he explained everything, there was silence between the two of them. Vorden had been prepared for a telling off, a scolding, or even sadness, but there was no reaction at all. After a few moments, Quinn started to walk towards him, with his head down. Seeing this, Vorden gulped and moved to the side out of the way. However, Quinn continued to move forward until he had eventually reached the door. Quinn, aren't you going to say anything? Vorden asked. He just couldn't stand the silence anymore. I'm disappointed, in not just you, Vorden, but everyone. Since when could you not trust me to make my own decisions? Even Weiss, when did you guys start making the decisions for me? Looking around at the door, Quinn lifted his hand and swung his fist into the door as hard as he could. Open the damn door, he shouted as he slammed his fist into the metal door again. It was sturdy as it was made out of glathrium, and even the strongest people could not do anything to the door. Quinn lifted his hand and proceeded to punch it again. This time the skin from his knuckles ripped, and there was a bloody fist mark left on the door. 4995th HP. Seeing this, Vorden hurried over and inputted the code at the side, allowing the doors to open. As soon as they did, Quinn continued to storm off and away. Wait, Quinn, where are you going? You're not going to try to do anything, are you? They're already gone, Vorden said, afraid that he might go looking for them, which was pointless. I know, said Quinn. I can no longer feel Peter's presence. It's too far away. I just want to be alone for a bit. Sometimes one needed space and time to heal. Vorden knew this better than most and decided to let him go for now until he had calmed down. When outside, Quinn continued to walk around the large platform in a circle. As he went by, he looked and went past each of the military hotels. He was thinking about everything that had happened until he had eventually stopped and started to look over the ledge down into the arena floor. I can't blame them. They did what they thought was best for me. And Peter, who knows what would have happened to him? The only person I can blame for being in the situation I'm in is myself. I'm just too weak. Too weak to help Peter. Too weak for Fex to even rely on me. And Fex, at first I didn't really trust him, but it seemed like he really did keep his word till the end. He didn't give me up to the vampires, and everything he did was to protect me. System, do you know what will happen to Fex and Peter once they find out Peter's real identity? Quinn asked. Honestly, I'm not too sure. It seems like a lot of time has passed, and as the world changes, so do the rules. Although vampires usually stay relatively close to tradition, a trial will be placed where the council shall decide their fate. If you want me to be really honest with you, they will kill Peter. They will assume he is something called an illegal since he won't be in their files. What they don't know is that Peter is not an illegal. What do you mean by that? Fex said that a vampire that wasn't created by one of the 13 leaders, or at least didn't have their permission, will be considered an illegal, correct? Yes, but don't you remember when you created your own family? Peter is part of the cursed family. Do you also remember when I told you to keep this a secret from other vampires no matter what? Well, I suppose it's time it told you the truth. Quinn, when you created that family, you became one of the 13 leaders. Your family name has taken over the missing 10th seat. The system explained. Wait, does that mean if I tell them who I am, about the family, then Peter will live and Fex won't get in trouble? Quinn asked. No, the system replied instantly. Think about it. Why do you think the 10th family seat was empty in the first place? I can't stop your destined fate in the future, Quinn, but I can delay it. You inform them of who you are now, and you will become a target of them in an instant. Then, explain to me. Explain what happened. Quinn shouted in his mind. Could you explain to me who you are? And explain to me what happened to the 10th family. And don't give me this crap that you can't tell me. Quinn already had some ideas and guesses of his own who the system was, as slowly everything was starting to be revealed. However, there was no point in overthinking it until he could confirm his guesses. I'm afraid I cannot tell. You're useless, Quinn said as he continued to storm off back to his hotel room. Inside the Military Base 1 hotel, on one of the top floors, an urgent knock was heard at one of the Big Four's doors. Sir, please answer immediately. We have a report from Duke. A man said, desperately trying to get into the room. Jack immediately answered the door after hearing Duke's name. If it was something in the middle of the night, it couldn't have been good news. What is it? Jack asked. It's about the student, Peter, is missing. Inside an elegant large room with a modern-looking design, Jack was sitting there, patiently tapping away at a desk in the corner. Standing by his side were 2 reasonably large guards. He always had someone by his side, no matter what, due to his unique situation. He wasn't like the other Big Four family members, for they believed in their own strength. He knew the others looked down on him because of this, but he didn't care. The 2 guards who stood by his side weren't the same pair as the time when he had visited the military base. After their mistakes, he decided to give them another role and had replaced them. Jack's way was the only, and very rarely did he give people second chances. If one was to mess up, he could always take their power away before giving it to another. The tapping continued, and the guards were now looking at Jack out of the corner of their eye as it seemed to be getting louder and louder. Damn it! He shouted as he slammed his fist on the desk. It has to be Pew. Once again, they got the upper hand and managed to get rid of him somehow, and there isn't even much I can do. Jack said. For this one, Jack was on his own. He hadn't informed Oscar or any of the other military personnel about Peter, how he was most likely a suspect of Pure. This was because he wanted to do everything himself. The only person who had been helping him along the way was General Duke. Duke was always the one who assigned 2 guards to be kept on Peter and decided who he would go up against and the ref while the others knew nothing. He couldn't ask for their help, and he couldn't start turning this place upside down, trying to look for an insider. Otherwise, they would find out. They would then question Jack's motives and put all the blame on him. Although he was in the position where it wouldn't be too much of a problem, he still just didn't want to deal with it. The others didn't like him in the first place. He knew that the other 3 regretted ever inviting him into the Big Four. The only reason why he was able to stay in his position of power was due to his great relationship with the military and Oscar. There was a good chance what he had tried to do would sour that relationship, and the others would use this opportunity to break it. The worst part about this whole mess was that now he had to make sure the others in military wouldn't find out about it. He was the one that now needed to cover up his own tracks. It was decided. A report was sent out to Duke with further instructions. Peter would no longer be taking part in the tournament due to an emergency matter. What emergency matter he would let him decide. When they returned to the military base, he would let Duke handle the rest. The disappearance of one student shouldn't be too hard to do in his position. An attempted runaway, a suicide. There were many different options they could put Peter's disappearance as. Pure. I promise if I ever find out where your base is, I'll send my whole army after you and crush you," he said, squeezing his fist tightly. The next day had arrived, and it was now morning. The events were not set for some time yet, and the main events even later. That's why Quinn found it very odd when he had a knock bright early in the morning. Before even opening the door, though, he knew who it was. He paused for a second and then braced himself before opening it. "Vorden, why are you here so early? The events don't start later," Quinn said, trying to make things seem familiar between them, but it was clear that it wasn't. "Am I allowed in?" Vorden asked. "Come on, don't be like that. Please. The more you act differently, the more you will remind me of the crap you pulled," Quinn said. Once inside the room, Vorden carried on walking and headed for the outside window. The bright light shined on his golden hair and handsome face. When looking at him now, the sadness in his eyes made him look like an abandoned prince. "I wanted to tell you about yesterday, before you go asking. You're right. It's not fair that I keep all my secrets while I know all of yours." Quinn himself was now feeling a little guilty as he hadn't told the others everything. But it wasn't like it was a big deal to explain to them how his powers worked. How it was a game like a system. Even if he did tell them, it wouldn't have changed anything. "How much do you remember before you were knocked out?" Vorden asked. "You mean when you were screaming that your name wasn't Vorden and you were Sil? Or when you nearly roasted me like a chicken before then zapping me?" Quinn replied. "Well, it looks like you remember everything then," said Vorden. "Like I said, yesterday that was me. There was no mind control or anything. Sil and I are the same person." "Vorden, you're going to have to be clearer than that. I really can't go into details, but have you ever heard of Did?" Quinn paused for a second as he thought about it. The strange actions, the fluctuations in voice, it indeed was like he was a different person. Suddenly, a memory came back to him. There was one time he had met Sil before, when he was being questioned. Quinn always wondered how Vorden had gotten away with the lying test back then. He thought he had borrowed a mind swap ability at the time. But what if that wasn't the case at all? "You mean you have split personalities?" Quinn said, shocked. He had heard of things like this before, but had never seen anything like this in person. He also never realized how separate these personalities were. He always thought if he was to meet someone with Did, it would be similar to a person who had mood swings. But the way Vorden had acted was almost like two people were living inside one body. I can't go into many details about how or why not yet anyway, but I will tell you one thing. I can copy only one ability. In comparison, the other one can copy 3. That's why I needed to switch with him yesterday when fighting you," Vorden explained. Purposely, Vorden avoided telling Quinn about Rayton. Having to tell someone this was hard enough, and he wasn't able to go into details about the whole thing anyway. So, for now, he would keep it as simple as possible. "Vorden, why didn't you tell us this? I told you about me being a vampire, right? If you told me, or even the others, we would have understood. Do you know why I'm telling you this, Quinn? Because I want to regain your trust. You trusted me, and now I'm trusting you." Vorden then held out his hand. When looking at it, it reminded Quinn of the first day the two of them had met. He was the only one that reached out to him. Ever since then, the two of them had been through all out. Then he remembered something else. The three of them had gone through a lot. There was also Peter. "I trust you, Vorden," Quinn said, shaking his hand. "But that doesn't mean I don't think you make stupid decisions. So, do I get to meet this guy at some point? Maybe we can be friends." Vorden laughed but chose not to say anything back. If Sil had heard this, he would have been running out from his corner and had taken over the seat in an instant. When approaching Quinn back then, when they had first met, he did so because he was a level 1. Often low levels looked at the world differently due to how they were treated. But after Sil had gained an interest, it meant now his life would revolve around Quinn. However, Vorden was happy that Sil had taken an interest in Quinn. He felt like the two of them were no real friends. "I also came here for something else as well," said Vorden. "I was hoping to come here before they did, and it looks like I beat them." "They?" Quinn replied, slightly confused. "Did you forget? Now that Peter isn't there, that means the substitute will have to take his place. They should be here soon to take you underground," Vorden explained. "Oh, I completely forgot about it. I never thought this would even happen. Oh, well, he said, shrugging his shoulders. I guess I'll just lose the match. Do you really want to do that, Quinn? What do you mean? I have to. I'm asking you again. Do you want to lose the match? Of course, Quinn didn't. For the longest time, ever since he had gotten his powers, he wanted to show all those people who thought he was weak, all those people that bullied him, what he could do. And more than ever, he tried to beat whatever net True Dream had set up for Quinn. All this mess in the first place was because of him in sick ways. We can't fight, said Vorden. On the Red Portal planet, we came up with a plan. Remember, if they discover your powers, then I would tell them that my family was backing you. We can use that today. Before Fex had left, he said something. He told us that he and the one who came to get him were the only vampires on the military bases, that there were no others. At the time, I was wondering why he needed to tell us that. It is always better to be careful just in case, right? But I think he knew what was going to happen once Peter was taken. He was telling you to go crazy, not to worry. With Vorden using his original family name, they would no longer be after Quinn for the ability book. They would assume it was with Vorden's family. The other problem was the vampires. Even if they weren't here, there was always the chance they would find out about him. But did that really matter anymore? It was only a matter of time before they found out about Peter, which would eventually lead them back to Quinn. If you're ready, said Vorden, then I am as well. I don't want to hide anymore, Quinn replied. Before leaving Quinn on his own, Vorden had a few last words to say to him. Hearing these words, he now knew what to do and was confident. Right after Vorden had left, he was on his own in his room. His heart, although beating slowly, was beating loud and strong. New rising energy was felt surging through his whole body. I wonder why I'm so excited. While being left on his own, he had time to reflect on everything and everyone that he had met so far. After finding that book and coming to the military school, he had a crazy journey he had never expected. More than anything, he didn't think there would be others who would join him along the way. A genius hacker, a terrorist or double agent, a vampire and an undead. Then you have the Ice Queen, and finally, the only one who I thought was normal, turns out to have a split personality. Quinn thought, I guess these were the only friends I could make. What they say is true. Crazy people attract other crazy people. Yesterday night, while on his walk, Quinn had regained all of his health points. As long as he wasn't hungry and needed blood, his body would naturally regenerate on its own. But if it did, it would make it also so he was hungry sooner. This made it hard for him to tell how practical the single session of restraining himself was. From the way Fex described it, as long as he wasn't drinking blood daily as he did before, then it shouldn't cause much change. He didn't know how much he managed to wean off the blood addiction, but from now on, he knew he had to be careful. With no blood flask, it would be a while until he could start consuming the blood of students again. Then suddenly a thought came to his head. He quickly opened up the system shop and continued to scroll through the options. That's it. There it is, Quinn said. The flask had been in the shop all along. At the time, he never thought such a thing would have been useful since he had the blood bank and Layla, but now it seemed like a handy item indeed. Then when looking at the ingredients needed, he was quickly disappointed. They were 2 intermediate-level beasts as well as an advanced Tier 1. For such a little item, it needed quite a few things. The problem was, they weren't items commonly found in the marketplace. Quinn would either have to hunt for it himself, which was near impossible, or hire someone else to get the item for him. However, now that he knew it was possible to make one of his own, he would keep it in mind. Maybe when he earned enough credits in the future, he would be able to start making items from the shop. Asterisk knock, knock, knock. Asterisk. Once again, a knock was heard on his door. It was still early morning, but he had been expecting this. Not knowing who the smell was coming from meant it was them. After opening the door, 3 soldiers dressed in the slick black uniform stood there tall and strong. Quinn Talen, correct? Yes, sir. An emergency matter involving Peter Chuck has caused him to drop out of the tournament. Due to this, the substitute of Dell's class, Quinn Talen, must participate. Please follow us. After a quick elevator ride down, they had finally arrived at the underground area. Unlike above, the students here were already awake and were practicing for the events. Still, many of them had nerves as it was only the second day. Before being able to join them, Quinn was further taken to a separate area where there was a desk and what looked like a small office area had been set up. Behind the desk, equipment was there for participants to be used as well as other things such as snacks and beverages. There were also many soldiers standing on guard, keeping an eye on everyone. The tension was high between the participants, and this often caused things to heat up between them. The soldiers didn't mind a bit of back and forth between students, but the second there was fighting they would stop it. Fights were to be displayed in the arena, not down below where nobody would see. The reason for bringing Quinn to the desk was because he needed to be registered. They handed him over a tablet where he was to input his fighting name. Oh, crap! I didn't think of this. I can't use my gamer ID, as Peter did. Even if I'm using my shadow powers, I won't be using my blood powers. Struggling to come up with a name, finally managed to put one down. The man at the desk looked at the tablet and chuckled, before handing it over to one of the other soldiers. You're free to use the training area as you wish. You will be called later on in the day, and your room number, if you want to rest, is 23, or if you manage to make it through. The man then paused for a second. He looked at Quinn's wristwatch and realized that it said the level 1. He shook his head in disbelief, not understanding what this class was thinking. Sure, the last student was a level 1, but they were clearly a special case, and the others could even see that due to the guards always being around them. Don't worry about it and just do what you want until we call you, the man said as he wafted his hand, suggesting for Quinn to go away. Was my name really that bad? Is that why he was laughing? Quinn thought. Looking around, there really wasn't much for him to do. Since the first round of fights had already been completed, the others knew what powers they had. This meant that the training hall was full of people using their powers. They would still keep moves hidden, but they were able to practice a lot better than before. But for Quinn, he still wanted to keep his powers hidden until the fight. Instead of fighting himself, he decided to lean up against the wall and keep an eye out on all the others. One of these in the room he would be fighting. He had been there for a good 5 minutes, and when leaning up against the wall, another person came to join him. One that was quite wide and large and had a square-looking head. The two said nothing to each other as they looked at all the participants. The person who was also up against the wall was Nate. The whole night, Sam had been excited after finding out that Zombie would be in the fighting event. It was a shame that the blood evolver didn't turn out to be Larry, but this had at least him up for it. However, as soon as he had entered the room, he looked and looked but couldn't see Peter anywhere. He stood out more than the others, and he wasn't the only one that had noticed this. Peter was now well known to everyone. He was the kid who always had 2 guards beside him. It also turns out he had an amazing regenerative ability. For him to suddenly disappear, they all could tell straight away. Noticing this, Nate knew that there had to be a replacement. Wanting to get a better look at everyone, he decided to look from the wall and look at all the participants taking part. From the first day, he had kept an eye on everyone as he went about looking for Larry. There were far fewer people today, but still, he couldn't see anyone new practicing. Where's the replacement? Suddenly, a large slash of air came out through. It was hard to see, but one could feel it if their senses were sharp enough. Nate, noticing this, turned to his side as he moved. At the same moment, he saw another student that had been on the wall with him the whole time. Hey, move! Nate shouted, but Quinn didn't listen. He too could sense the wind and instead decided to stay still, knowing that the attack wasn't going to hit him. The attack slammed into the wall, making a small bang as it hit like the end of the whip. However, there was no marking on the walls for it was made of glathrium. Oh, sorry. That almost hit you. Are you two okay? A student said, running over. Be careful next time. Nate shouted back. How stupid and bad could you be? This room's massive and you managed to make a stray attack come over here. He was clearly annoyed. The student continued to apologize, but a few others behind him were also looking over. It was no accident, Quinn mumbled as he finally left the wall and started to walk over towards the student. He had overheard the student speaking the whole time. They could see that Nate and Quinn were just standing there by the wall and wanted to give them a little scare. When the attack came towards Quinn, He knew that they had aimed precisely in the middle of the two of them, and there was no need for him to move. All they wanted to do was scare them. After all, if he or Nate were hurt, the students would have gotten in trouble. When looking over in the students' direction from where the attack had come from, he could also see a bunch of girls off to the side. There and then something clicked in his head. It wasn't an accident. If I know thirsty boys, those guys were trying to impress those girls. Why did Nate this? It was because he would have perhaps tried something similar in his own youth. As Nate saw the curly-haired student walk towards the boy, he was wondering just what was going to happen. Wait, is that the new guy? It has to be. I don't remember seeing him down here. Looking at his wristwatch, he could see the level 1, but something else had worried him even more. He could see the student clenching his fist, ready for a punch. Back on the top platform, the students were starting to gather in front of the screens for the first events to start. The others had left the hotel together and were now peacefully sitting in front of screen 2. Just then, Sam had arrived from his own hotel, as he had agreed to meet up with them yesterday. "Hey, where's Quinn?" Sam asked, noticing he wasn't sitting down with them. "Well," Vorden replied, "is taking part in the fighting tournament." The drink that was held in Sam's hand nearly dropped to the floor, but he quickly tightened his grip, and then a small smile appeared on his face. "Oh, really? I don't know why fate has decided to put you on the battlefield. All I know is everyone might be in for one hell of a surprise," Sam thought. While looking at all the students and relaxing up on the wall, Quinn was busy thinking away. The energy from before and his strong heartbeat hadn't settled down. Every second meant the fight he was about to participate in was getting closer and closer. This whole event was starting to remind him of the past. Life before the book. How he was too weak before. He was too weak to help Peter. He was too weak to help himself. How the other students used to beat him every day, and the most he could do was get a hit in here or there. Thinking about how much he hated his life back then every single day. How the school chose to do nothing because he wasn't destined for great things. And again when arriving at the military base, how they started to target those around him as well as him. All these bad memories were making him angrier. At that moment, when walking, the picture of him getting hit and beaten by these losers were playing in his head. Hearing the students behind laughing and what they had said, he already had enough of this. He couldn't do anything back then, but he could now. Seeing Quinn's fist tightening, Nate could tell what was about to happen straight away. Although the kids deserved to get hit, Nate didn't want the new student being punished for it. He would be the aggressor in this situation if his punch landed. However, there was also a second reason Nate wanted to stop a fight. The people he was walking to were level 7s. There weren't many weak people left in the fighting event. If a fight was to happen, he couldn't see Quinn coming out of it unharmed. "Hey, is he coming over to us? What does he think he's doing?" One of the students from behind said. The student in front was also annoyed. Although he had thrown out the wind strike, he was only trying to have a little fun. He knew the attack wouldn't hit them, so he felt like it was no reason for anyone to get angry. "What the hell, you brat? What are you getting so annoyed for when I already said I was sorry?" The student complained. "I'm in no mood for games. Out of all the days to try to pull this crap, today is not that day." Quinn said, "Of course it's my fault, right? It's always the fault of the weak ones for being born this way." The sound of Quinn's voice, he wasn't sure if he was imagining it, but there was certainly some type of undertone when he was speaking. The student looked around to see if his friends behind had heard, or if it was just him. They continued to laugh and joke around and even gave a thumbs up towards him. They didn't hear that. Am I going crazy? The student thought. Out of panic and desperation, he threw a wind slash. Quickly, Quinn moved his body to the side and started walking forward again. To the student in front of him, it looked like the attack had just gone right through his body. Now the student was starting to feel his palms sweat. He threw out another attack, and once again, ever so slightly, Quinn would place his foot, allowing him to just avoid the attack and go back into position. The movement was so small it could hardly be seen. The outsiders who were watching such a thing were confused. All they could see was one student walking forward, while the other was walking backwards in the middle of the room. The student who was throwing out the wind blades was using a unique technique. When wind users use such an attack, Usually a thin white line could be seen striking the air, but the wind user's attack was invisible to the eye and could only be felt. "What's Josh doing?" a student said. "Is he pretending to attack? I knew he was too soft. He thinks he can bluff his way out." However, a few moments later, and the large whip-like sound could be heard as the wind attacks reached the end of how far they could go. The loud banging noise was continuously heard, and now the others were in shock. Josh wasn't just moving his hands about, he was actually throwing out attacks. The loud noise had managed to catch the attention of the small pop-up office from earlier. "What is going on over there?" the man at the desk said, scratching his head. As he looked over, he could see the new student. "I thought something like this might have happened. These damn kids always like to go after the weak ones. Stop this before it gets out of hand," the man ordered. A soldier from the post was immediately on his way. Seeing the soldier coming over, Nate breathed a sigh of relief. He was hesitating himself whether to get involved or not, but was afraid he could have been hurt by the wind users. It wasn't easy to sense those attacks. Nate believed that the student had thrown out those attacks and had missed on purpose, trying to scare the student away. The two were now close enough, and Quinn dashed forward. Josh lifted his hand ready to throw another wind strike right at the student. The soldier who was on his way could see this. If that attack hits, the other might be seriously hurt. The soldier thought, and he too had dashed forward. What they didn't expect was for what Quinn had done next. He lifted his leg fast up towards his head and then slammed it down, performing an axe kick right on the student's wrist. Josh's hand slammed down and was pinned against the floor. Josh tried to move, but even using his whole strength, he couldn't budge. If he tried any harder, he was afraid his wrist would break if it wasn't already broken. After the axe kick had been performed, Quinn threw out his fist. There was no hammer strike, there was no blood spray, it was just an ordinary punch, but it did contain his full strength behind it. As the punch went forward, a man stood in the way and braced himself, holding both his arms in a cross shape. That's it. Just a little weak punch." The student around started to laugh. The blow had hit the man, but he remained there solid and still, not having moved an inch, and the expression on his face hadn't changed at all. "Come on, Josh, you could have taken the punch and just hit him back." The student continued to mock their friend. "Stop this at once," the man said. "Fighting is reserved for the arena and not underground. If you continue, then you shall be punished." When Quinn had looked at who he had hit, he noticed it was one of the soldiers. He then peeked around the soldier to see the student behind him. Grabbing his wrist, it looked like it was starting to swell. "It's okay. I think he's learnt his lesson," Quinn said as he walked off. "Wait!" the soldier shouted. "Young boy, who's your teacher?" "You mean Dell?" Quinn replied. "No, not your homeroom teacher. That kick, you in the beast weapons class." "Yes. My teacher is Sergeant Leo," Quinn replied as he walked off. The soldier said no more and allowed Quinn to walk off just like that. "Wait, you're going to let him go?" Josh cried. "Look at my wrist. I think he broke it." "Stop your complaining. Something like this can easily be fixed by the doctors before your event, and don't think I didn't see where you had planned to use your own strike. In my eyes, this was a simple act of self-defense." The soldier's decision was final, and Josh could see that. There was no more use complaining, and he wouldn't try bothering Quinn again. After the fight had been broken up, Quinn had gone back to the wall to relax once again. Nate came rushing over with a glow in his eyes, for he had seen something quite impressive. "Hey, that kick was impressive. You must have practiced a lot to get it that smooth and fast." Nate was a junkie for martial arts. Even before learning what type of ability he had, he preferred the pure skill people would use in hand-to-hand combat. The fact that it also helped him out with his ability was only a bonus. "If you want, maybe we can spar sometime," Nate asked, then looked down at his watch, which made us add a few last words. Without abilities, of course. Quinn could see that the student was a nice person. He didn't look threatening at all, even if he did seem to be a bit annoying. "Sure, it sounds fun." Back at the pop-up office, the soldier had returned to make a report of the events that had occurred. "Anything to report?" the man at the desk asked. "A broken wrist? Nothing else. They won't fight again. I'm sure of it." The man at the desk paused for a second as he looked at the soldier before speaking again. Go back to your duties. You're dismissed. Oh, and before you go, make sure to see a doctor about the broken arm of yours. Yes, sir, the soldier said as he rushed off. This is an announcement. Will all students get into their designated groups? The main event will begin shortly. The students were told to prepare themselves for the event. They started to pick their best beast gear and left whatever they didn't need behind. They then were organized by the soldiers into their new groups. Once again, it seemed like even on the second day, all the first years were placed in the same group. This was to continue making the fights fairer and enjoyable. Even if a first year was stronger, Thea was the key difference between them and the second years, which was using a soul weapon. As the students finished getting into Thea groups, several heads twisted and turned, and mumbling between the participants seemed to be going around quickly. They all realized that the infamous Zombie was no longer there. Looking over at all the groups, Nate noticed that he wasn't with his newly found friend he had just made, since he was a second year, but it also seemed like everyone was turning to No to look at him. So, use Zombie's replacement. A student in the group said, I wonder what happened to him. Rather than being interested in Quinn himself, they were far more concerned about where or why Zombie wouldn't be taking part in this fight. Seeing his ability, he couldn't have possibly been injured. This was the usual reason for one dropping out of the tournament. If it was an injury that wouldn't have been able to be healed on time before the next match. All right, everyone, it's time to make your way up to the stage. Group A, please follow me. It was time for Quinn and the others to make their way to the arena. As Quinn was about to pass through the entrance, the soldier from before stopped him, for he had a newfound interest in him. Wait, aren't you going to take any beast gear with you into the fight? If you don't have any, the rules state we can at least lend you some basic protection equipment. It wasn't beast gear, as that would be unfair to the others, but the man worried about him. He needed at least some thick leather. It's okay, Quinn replied. I have everything I need. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Inside the booth, the four leaders, including the Supreme Commander Oscar, arrived in their seats. They were free to do what they wanted during regular events, but wanted to have the best seats in the house for the main three events. They had just finished watching the ranged event and crafting event. The Big Four families would often teach the same ability, but the ability varied in strength depending on the person. However, when watching, they still kept a close eye. There were many factions and other families that were under the banner of the Big Four. If they were to see a student who really interested them, they could invite them over to join a family under them, in Tane, growing the power of their own. Finally, it was time for the fighting event. The first years will be fighting first, correct? Mona asked, is there anyone you have your eyes on? Hearing this reminded both Bernie and Owen of their encounter with the Blade Child. He was in his first year. After hearing no news of anything happening yesterday, they assumed he might have just wanted to practice with their powers. Anyway, whatever the child wanted to do, it was none of their business. That child named Zombie P interests me, said Owen. His regeneration speed was remarkable, and yet somehow, even without any beast gear, he was able to deliver a knockout punch. Perhaps he is skilled in the martial arts. He wouldn't be the first person to perform superhuman feats beyond the norms of a human body. Mona replied, what was his name? I believe he finally decided to become a teacher. You are talking about Sergeant Leo, Oscar replied. And unfortunately, we won't be seeing Zombie P perform in today's match. I got a report this morning from the doctor. He can't move, his whole body's frozen. They think it's possibly a drawback from whatever powers he displayed yesterday. Hearing this, Jack was pleased. It seemed like Duke had really pulled through for him again. Of course, a healing power that strong would have its own drawbacks, Bernie said with his arms crossed as he snorted hot air from his large nostrils once again. Then, that means we will see a new person. Mona asked. This won't be fun at all. The substitute is a substitute for a reason, simply because they weren't good enough to be picked in the first place. If it happened in the first round, sure, it might have been entertaining. But the students that are left are quite strong. I almost feel sorry for the student. Although Jack didn't feel sorry for the student, he thought it would be an incredibly quick match. After the surprise turn of events of yesterday, Jack didn't want the same thing happening twice. Out of all the first-year students participating in the event this year, he made it so the Duke would allow him to fight the strongest one. At least the strongest one he could get. There were a couple of first-year students that were part of the Big Four families. Those he didn't want to get involved in too much, so he picked the next best choice. He wanted to humiliate Peter while also drawing out Pure. But with Pure already succeeding in their task, the opponent he had prepared would now be going against the substitute. The platforms had been prepared and spread out across the arena floor. This time the platforms were at least 2 times the size as the previous ones. This was because they would now be displaying only 5 fights at the same time. It also allowed for more large-scale fighting and fewer defeats via the knockout from falling off. It was boring seeing participants just falling to the ground. The audience would much rather watch a display of great skills. Please, everyone, welcome your first round of participants. The crowd cheered loudly as it was the last event of the day. They always did save the best until last, which was why no one had left, and it seemed like not a single seat was empty in the arena. The participants slowly walked onto the stage, and just like everyone else, they too soon realized that one of their favorites from the first round wasn't there. The crowd wasn't too bothered, but the students, in particular, were surprised. What? Where's Zombie P? I can't see him. Does this mean he won't be fighting? Yeah, look, there's someone I haven't seen before. Something must have happened, and now the substitute has to fight. The camera on screen focused on all the participants one by one as they made their way to the platform, and the crowd could see their big faces appear. That's when Owen noticed the boy who had taken Zombie P's place. Now, this is interesting, he thought as his eyes widened. He quickly took out the mask from his waist and opened it outward, covering his mouth. He didn't want the others to see the smile. That was the boy who was with the Blade family child. Wasn't he only a level 1, if I remember seeing correctly? I see it now. Owen thought. Like a jigsaw puzzle, things were coming into place for him. It would be stupid to put just any level 1 ability user in there. And he remembered the boy saying something strange. He remembered he stated he had beaten the game at level 5 yet didn't go any higher than that. Based on their reaction and him being in the tournament now, it had to be him in the video. Coming to this realization, he did everything he could to hold in his laughter, but failed as his shoulders began to move up and down. What's so funny? Jack asked, seeing his slanted eyes that were shaped like 2 crescent moons peek just above the shaking fan. I just think we will be in for a surprise today, Owen said. The names of each of the participants were announced as they then rose onto the large pillar-like platform. Finally, they had gotten to Quinn and his opponent. First, we have the student who dominated their last round and gave us an amazing show. Please welcome the multiplier. Oh, he was a good one. He is one of the ones I had my eye on, Mona said excitedly. Wait, isn't he going against the substitute? What a shame. I thought this time we might see more of his skills. What is the substitute's ability, Oscar? Owen asked out of interest. Oscar then sighed as he heard this. I honestly don't know what they were thinking, but they managed to convince management, saying he is one of the students currently with the highest amount of points in their base. It turns out he has no ability at all. Oscar replied, Rats, I can't believe they're wasting our time with this. You should have stepped in and done something. I thought you were in charge of this place. Bernie complained. Sadly, I only got the report just before entering this room. Oh, I wouldn't worry too much, Owen interjected. I think we all will be more surprised than you think. The others chose to ignore Owen's words. To them, it seemed like the youngster who just wanted a different option compared to everyone else, like a child who would say the opposite answer compared to the whole class just to get attention. And his opponent, unfortunately, Zombie P has had to exit from the tournament due to medical emergencies, which means today we have a replacement. Please welcome to the stage, the cursed child. From above, Vorden and the others all shook their head and slapped it in disappointment. What's with his naming sense? Vorden thought. Couldn't he think of something a little less cringy? Layla started to giggle a little. I kinda like it, better than his other name anyway. The reason for choosing this name was because of how he felt at the time, and felt similar to when he had created his vampire family. He also didn't want to choose a name that gave away his abilities. And on top of that, he wasn't able to use his old favorite name, the Blood Evolver. Asterisk beep asterisk beep asterisk beep asterisk. The three beeps indicated it was time for the event to start, and as soon as it did, Shadow equip. Shadows surrounded Quinn's body, legs, and arms, and a few seconds later, they had dispersed, revealing all of his equipment. The soldier watching from below smiled while looking at the screen. You really did have everything you need. But one who was even more shocked and more excited was Nate. He has gauntlets, another Year 1 student who uses gauntlets as a weapon. A strange level 1 user just like the zombie. Now that I think about it, that kick as well. Skillful in martial arts. It can't be. Is he the Blood Evolver? Other than the people that were there to support Quinn, Nate, and the soldier, not many others were looking at his match. They simply thought it was a done deal when they had heard the word substitute. No one could really blame them for feeling that way. In the years before, when a substitute had come onto the stage, the match was usually over fairly quickly. This was the same for inside the booth as well, as they decided to look at other potential fights that maybe they weren't able to catch last time. Even Jack's gaze had wandered off into the direction of others. The only Perez who had seen the quick shadows forming and disappearing was Owen. You are surprising me even more. Turns out you do have an ability. How did you manage to hide that from the military for so long? Owen said. More importantly, why would you? When the others' attention had returned back to the platform Quinn was fighting on, they were surprised to see him wearing beast gear that he wasn't wearing before. Did I miss something? Bernie said, confused. Are you talking about Arena 5? Mona replied. I was sure he didn't have beast gear on as well either. Owen then started to giggle away in the corner like a little girl, knowing he was the only one who had seen what had happened. How about we have a little wager on the fight going on in Arena 5? Owen said, waving his fan on his head. The wind was moving his long curly hair that somehow wasn't going all over his face. Greylash, Oscar said. You know that's against the rules. Don't be silly, Owen replied. Fine, if you really want to be such a sour grape, then we don't have to bet anything. What's the point? Mona interjected. There's a clear winner unless you know something we don't. Owen didn't really know much, but it was as if the signs were telling him this boy was special. There were a few things that he did know compared to them. He was friends with the powerful Blade family. He was able to beat the block game past level 5, and finally, he had an ability that was hidden from the military. All of these were why Owen was confident that the one named Cursed Child would win. Do you all agree with what Miss Bree said? Owen asked. All of the people in the room remained silent. Common sense just told them that it wasn't possible, and again, they just felt like the Greylash was trying to cause drama. Then I will take your silence as a yes. All of you against me. If the Cursed Child is to win the fight, then I get first pick when sending out invitation letters to the students. If I lose, then I will have to pick up what's left. Deal? Bernie said with cheer in his voice. It seemed like a foolish offer to him, and it was also a chance for him to get one up on the arrogant new young master. I can shove it in his face. Although the others didn't believe anything special would happen, what the bet had done was made sure that everyone's eyes in the booth were now following Quinn's fight and not the others. Just at the slight chance that perhaps Greylash could see something. Looking carefully at his opponent in front of him, Quinn was able to see that the student was a level 8. Thankfully, he was also a Year 1 student, which meant he didn't have to worry about him having a soul weapon. The student's most likely an original then. I didn't get to see the first batch of fights because I was too busy dealing with CIA at the time. I need to be careful until I find out what his ability is. This was Quinn's debut fight, his stage, and he wasn't going to act so rashly. Perhaps he would have performed differently, but the fight previously with Vorden had shown him his place. There were still powers and abilities out there that were far stronger than his current shadow. It wouldn't always protect him from everything. Analyzing the multiplier closer, he could see a high level of beast equipment as well. Using the inspect skill allowed him to break it down even further. From head to toe, he was covered in intermediate armor, and in his hand a pair of daggers at the advanced level. There was also by his side small little blades across his belt. Trying to get the upper hand, Quinn tried to use the inspect skill on him as well, hoping to find out his ability. However, it had only come up with question marks. His inspect skill was still only able to tell him basic abilities and not originals. Seeing his opponent was still on the other end of the platform, he was thinking of what to do. With no blood spray, the impact of his punches would have lessened, and with no blood swipe and crescent kick, his range was limited. For the first time, he was starting to see how handy the combination of his blood powers and shadow powers were, for he was limited on attacking options. The shadow acted more as a shield and a support attack for his blood powers, but here where he couldn't use them, he was limited. The two students stood looking at each other, and eventually, Quinn grew tired of waiting. If he's not going to show his powers, then I don't need to show mine. A wind walk. The skill on his boots was activated, and he dashed forward with all his strength. It looked like he managed to cover the area of the arena in an instant. The boots, when activated, glowed slightly red, showing they were in use. Is moving that fast? How good is the equipment he's wearing? A student asked. But it wasn't just the equipment alone. It was also Quinn's natural speed that had made him travel so fast. Multiplier looked like he was shocked as he braced himself for the attack. Quinn threw out a fist as quick as he could, wanting to get the fist hit. The punch landed right in his opponent's face. Is this really a level 8? Quinn thought as he saw his attack hit his opponent clean. As the man's face moved to the side, Quinn had double-checked to see if he was seeing things. For behind the multiplier was another Perozan who looked exactly the same as him. The first one that had been hit, and he puffed into a cloud of black air. The second, who was behind him, swung his dagger from below towards Quinn's face, but his reactions were fast, and using the gauntlets, Quinn was able to block the first attack with his forearm. A large dent was made across from his elbow upward as the attack was deflected. It was clear the daggers were better quality than his gauntlets. Durability 1800. Wanting to attack again, Quinn threw out his leg, preforming a roundhouse kick to his waist. Suddenly, something from underneath came sweeping across the floor, hitting his other leg that was on the floor, causing him to fall to the floor. Now looking up from the floor, Quinn could see the clear blue sky, but at the same time, another two multipliers. They both came rushing down, trying to stab Quinn with Thea 4 daggers. What they didn't expect was for Quinn to be too fast. Moving his hands at a speed that couldn't be seen, he pulled both of Thea's legs. Thea's bodies fell to the floor. Once he got up, he performed an axe kick, kicking one of them in the stomach, the same thing as last time had occurred. The person had puffed into black smoke. Quickly turning around, he kicked the other, and it was the same result. Looking around the arena, Quinn finally understood. I should have known. His name was a dead giveaway. Quinn said. Standing in the center, Quinn had been surrounded by 6 students who looked exactly the same. A cloning ability? Layla asked. It's a bit more than that, Vorden replied. The user is able to produce clones in an instant, as long as he has enough MC cells to do so. Judging by the number of clones is already created and how freely he is producing them, he has a lot. Oh, so that's why when Quinn hits them they keep bursting into smoke. She asked. The clones can usually take a fair bit of damage before puffing into smoke. My guess is Quinn's attack is a lot stronger than it looks to everyone else. The problem is, although Thea just clones, Thea weapons and everything about them are very real. The attacks will hurt just as much as if it was done from the original. So if he defeats the original, he can beat them all then, right? Technically yes, but there's another problem. Judging by his MC level being a level 8 and him being in this tournament, he's most likely also learned his family's body swap skill. It allows the user to switch the real body with one of the clones whenever they wish. You explained everything perfectly, Vorden, Logan said as he was typing away on a small little computer. It had been constructed via his little spiders. I looked up information on the Multipliers family. They aren't original and everything you described is accurate. Sam had decided to keep quiet, but he too thought it was amazing that a normal student knew so much information without looking it up, especially about an original family. The 6 multipliers all surrounding Quinn reached for the small blades around Thea's waist. There was nowhere to hide, and they were guaranteed a hit. He could block the ones from the front, but it would be near impossible to block them from the back. Well, Ben said inside the booth. Looks like we were right. It seems the Greylash was just trying to cause drama for no reason. All you did was manage to waste our time. I have to admit, Mona said. I got a little excited when I saw him dashing forward at such a fast speed, but that speed seems to be useless now. Owen remained silent. He thought the others were silly. Could they not see the same thing he was seeing? When looking at Quinn, was that the look of someone who looked like they were about to lose. The multiplier at the same time from each of his clones threw out 2 daggers each towards the center. They came out fast and powerful. TCH boring, Jack said, but soon he started to think differently. For some reason, a smirk had appeared on the cursed child's face. Shadow control. From the bottom of his feet, a thin veil of purple shadow had appeared and had stopped all of the little blades in Theatrax midair. They hovered in place and were unable to move forward. What power is that? Nate said, looking at the screen. Inside the arena, 2 of the 5 fights had come to an end, and only 3 of the fights remained. The camera had decided to focus on Quinn's match at this very moment. They could see that the multiplier was trapped and thought another contestant would soon be eliminated from the competition. When the daggers were thrown, everybody waited in anticipation of what the multiplier would do to follow up this attack, and how he would dismantle his opponent as he had done previously. What they didn't expect was for the sudden reveal of a strange power that no one had ever seen before. The sheet of purple shadow rose from Quinn's feet surrounding him. It was moving ever so slightly, and the small blades seemed to have stopped just as they touched it. Hey, do you know what ability that is? A person from the crowd asked. No, I've never seen anyone with it before. I wonder what it does or how it works. Wait, what is Quinn doing? Layla shouted. Why is he showing his powers, and worst of all right now in front of everyone? Sam looked carefully at the strange power. He had expected Quinn to be hiding something. He even thought he was 100% sure that he was the Blood Evolver, but he had never seen the Blood Evolver do this before. Even if they had learned a new skill, there was a clear difference between what he was seeing right now. The Blood Evolver's powers produced a red aura, while this was purple and dark. It felt different. I assume you have something to do with this, Logan said, looking at Vorden since he seemed to be the only one who hadn't acted so surprised at the outcome. Is sick and tired of hiding, Vorden replied. I can feel it, and I think you guys can too. The whole situation was just frustrating him more and more as the days went by. Sooner or later this was going to happen, so might as well do it now. But won't people come after him after they learn about his background? Layla asked. He was an orphan and the military knew he had no ability before. The others will try to ask for the ability book, or try to find out how he learned this. Don't worry. After this, I told him he could say my family is looking after him, and he gave the ability book to them for safekeeping. And what original family do you come from? Sam asked. If Vorden was confident to use his family's name to protect a rare ability, they had to be strong. If they weren't, then others would still try to attack or pressure them in some way to obtain the ability book. My family is the Blade family, Vorden responded. Sam started to think hard if he had ever heard such a name before, but he tried and tried. He was quite knowledgeable and even knew some medium-sized factions and families, but the Blades just didn't seem to ring a bell. However, since his family was an original family and managed to stay that way, it meant it would still give Quinn some protection. When abilities started to become more well-known around the world and families began to reveal themselves, some of the original families were broken up and had their abilities learned and stolen, eventually making them known to the public. They then were no longer known as originals. Only the more potent abilities, or the ones under the big 3 at the time, were able to keep their abilities and powers to themselves. If Vorden's family was still considered an original, they had to have some influence, right? Opening up a part of the shadow from the front, the small blades moved again, and Quinn had blocked them with his gauntlets. He then moved out from where the shadow was originally placed and allowed for the shadow to return to him. As soon as he did this, the blades continued to move forward, wholly missing and falling off the arena. On 94 100 MC cells, the small blades were only at the basic tier level. This was why Quinn knew he could block it with only a thin layer of the shadow. At the same time, the damage it had done was small. The Shadow Cloak skill activated. Then, In front of everyone's eyes on the stage and from the booth, Quinn had disappeared entirely. The stronger ones could still sense where Quinn was, as this was only a visual effect, an illusion almost, but to the crowd, they now couldn't see anything. Multiplier himself had quite keen senses and could tell Quinn was still here, but found it hard to pinpoint his exact location. The problem was, Quinn was just too fast. When attacking, the shadow cloak was disabled, and a fist seemed to come flying out of nowhere, delivering a punch to the head. The puff of black smoke appeared once more. Not that one. Seeing another one not too far away, he decided to use the flash step, moving himself right in the position of the next person. Without hesitation, an uppercut was delivered, and with it, another cloud of smoke appeared. From behind, his sensitive ears had picked up the sound of footsteps running up to him. Quickly spinning his body and lifting his leg, he performed a spinning back kick, hitting Multiplier through the air and off the arena ground. All the fights around them were now being ignored. Each puff of black smoke appearing, the crowd cheered in response. It was as if they were watching a skilled traveler take on several men at once. While one person came towards Quinn at the front, another was behind him. The two daggers came toward both his body and his head. Using both of his hands, Quinn was able to grab him by the wrist, but that didn't stop the second person coming from behind. Is he done for? The crowd thought. But Quinn knew all along what was happening. From underneath his feet, the shadow rose once again, stopping the attack. 1800 MC. The attack had been blocked, but this time it had taken a lot more of his MC points to deal with it. This was due to the weapon being an advanced tier 1. Throwing out a kick towards his opponent's stomach finished the first one off, and then a spin with the back of his fist hitting the one behind him. The two opponents had been finished off. Looking around him and at the arena, he could still see the 6 of the same person, even though he had already defeated multiple clones. Damn, which one is the real one? They all smell exactly the same. What Quinn didn't know was the Multiplier was able to switch his real body with any of the clones he created at any time. The Multiplier not once had even gotten close to Quinn. How he wished he was able to use his blood abilities right now. Using Blood Swipe, he could attack far away or with a crescent kick, and if there were multiple enemies, he could use the blood spray. There was another problem. Sooner or later, his MC points would run out. The weapon the Multiplier used was strong, and it could only block so many more attacks. Quinn was careful not to get hit, and if he did and the fight got rough, there was a good chance his blood bank would automatically activate. His healing wasn't as impressive as Peter's, but it was still to the point where one would think he had a healing ability. This, in turn, would cause so many questions to be asked. Well, it looks like this match certainly has gotten interesting, Owen said, giggling away. I knew you wouldn't play fair, Bernie replied. You knew he actually had an ability, didn't you? I knew no such thing. How would I know information that not even Oscar knew? Owen replied. Bernie was now looking at Oscar for an answer. If anyone should have known about his powers, it should have been him. Oscar was starting to wonder how Owen knew or came to know of this as well. I think this makes the whole thing a lot more interesting, Mona added. It would have been boring otherwise. Besides, a bet is a bet. Even if you did know he had an ability, the Multiplier is one of the strongest people in this tournament, and that fact still doesn't change. Besides, we all know how the Multiplier likes to toy with his opponents from the last fight, and he still hasn't shown everything he's got. Although, with a cursed child, I do wonder what level his ability is at. It is a hard one to judge, Owen replied. The ability itself doesn't seem to have many attacking opportunities. If the user himself wasn't so skilled in hand-to-hand combat, then this fight might have been long over. However, it also seems the ability itself is versatile. It cloaked him, making him almost invisible, and also, it can be moved around at will like an elemental power. I have a feeling we haven't seen everything yet. Back on the platform, Quinn slowly made his way back into the center. The others found this quite the amateur move as it allowed him to be surrounded. If he stood near the outer edge, he was able to face opponents coming from one direction. Yes, there was a higher chance one would be knocked off from the stage, but it still gave him better options. Still, Quinn knew if he weren't the aggressor, he would eventually lose this fight. Once in the center, all the clones threw their small blades again, and Quinn repeated with the same action, lifting the shadow and blocking the attacks. "I can do this all day. Come on," Quinn shouted, hoping that the multiplier would try something new. All of them switched and pulled out their daggers. "Oh, do you think you've won?" the multiplier spoke. When speaking, each of his clones spoke simultaneously, and the voice sounded louder together like an odd choir. "You do know I've been playing around with you this whole time. You see, I like to toy with my opponents, sometimes make them feel like they are winning. Some matches I start with 2. For others, I begin with 4. After seeing how easily you dealt with my clones, I decided on 6. But I guess that wasn't enough." From behind the 6 people that surrounded the arena, another 6 people were seen behind them as they moved to the side to make 12. It was the first time in the tournament the multiplier had ever used 12 people to fight so far. "Let's see how you deal with this," the multiplier said, as all 12 clones decided to charge in towards the center at the same time. "Perfect," Quinn said. Shadow Void. A thick purple shadow spread out from his feet across the floor in all directions from where Quinn stood. Once it reached a particular area, it started to rise, eventually creating a small dome shape. The dome encased both Quinn and all of the clones with him. From the outside, the public suddenly couldn't see anything but a purple dome of moving shadows. "What's going on?" the crowd said. "Are they still fighting in there? This had to be that cursed child's ability, right? Are you starting to feel nervous about our little bet?" Owen asked. "Although I don't know what this strange dome thing does, I cannot believe one person could take on 12. I didn't even know the multiplier could copy himself that many times. If I have him in one of my families, it would be like having a little squad. He would be able to go out on solo missions on his own." As time went by and nothing was happening, even Bernie was starting to get nervous. It shouldn't have taken this long for someone to beat one person. Finally, the shadows around started to fade away slowly. They began to disappear from the top of the dome to the bottom and eventually returned to the original user's 2 feet, where one person could be seen standing, while the other was beaten entirely and knocked out on the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our winner, the Cursed Child." A huge upset had occurred in the arena. It was something the others hadn't expected. One of the favorite from the first years had been defeated, and what was worst, the others weren't even able to see how it was done. "That's impossible," Bernie said, standing up from his seat. At the same time, he banged the side of his armchair. It briefly went up in flames before the whole side of the thing burnt to a crisp. It was amazing how quick it was disappeared as to not affect the whole chair. "Calm down," Oscar demanded. Bernie was always a hot-headed fool, and he knew this bet was a bad idea. However, even Oscar didn't think this would be the final outcome, so he allowed for it to continue. "Can't you see?" said Bernie. "That kid, he didn't just win, but there isn't even a single scratch on him." The others had, of course, noticed this as well. For this to have happened, the fight inside the dome couldn't have been a close one. The dome-shaped shadow was either very powerful or it was there to conceal the boy's real strength from the eyes of everyone else. Jack's whole body was shaking, but not because he was upset. It was out of joy, a mysterious power that was able to rival top original families, yet didn't belong to any of the Big Four. This was the perfect opportunity for him. Whatever he did, he needed to get this power for himself. However, there was a small problem. Something he never thought would get in the way, and that was the bet. Jack was one of the ones that hadn't spoken up when the deal was made, meaning Owen was able to get the first choice when inviting students to their families. There was no way a student would turn down such an offer from one of the Big Four. Perhaps there was some way he could persuade him. Once the event was over, he would contact the others at his tower to find out everything they could about the boy named Cursed Child. "Well, I must say I think I've got a pretty bright future ahead of me," Owen said, laughing. Oscar looked at the student one more time standing in the arena. "Looks like I need to speak to the people at the second base. How they were this tardy to not notice something like this is beyond my comprehension. Anyway, Quinn Talen, I shall be keeping an eye on you." The cheering in the arena had continued for a lot longer than usual. People always seemed to love the unexpected. It was exciting to think about what this new power and surprise could do. While standing in the center, Quinn looked down at the multiplier and started to recall what happened when the shadow void had been cast. Even with the void covering the view of the others, Quinn couldn't use his blood abilities. There was a high chance that the influence skill wouldn't work on him. He would then reveal to everyone what had happened after the fight. It was a risk he still couldn't take. However, what the multiplier also didn't realize was he wasn't the only one who had been holding back the whole fight. As the multiple clones came towards him, for a brief second Quinn closed his eyes and started to think back to the block game. The slightest sound, the slightest movement, he was able to see the attacks just as they moved. The multiplier was doing near enough the same thing, using his clones to attack him from multiple directions, and even though there was 12 of them, there was only so much space that could be used to attack. The 12 had come towards him. He could see a slight twitch in the first one's shoulder. He attacked as soon as he saw the slightest movement, and the first one was down. Using all of his limbs, his legs, his arms, Quinn blocked, dodged, and allowed for even the clones to hit each other. Everything was done at a speed that hadn't been used in the match before. Fex was a lot more versatile when I fought him with his strings, he said as he hit one clone. Vorden's ability was a lot stronger than this, as he kicked another, and the King Tier Beast was a hell of a lot faster, he said as he punched the last clone in the stomach. All 12 of the clones had been defeated. Only one remained away in the distance towards the edge. I need to make more, Multiplier said, but his energy was starting to drain. There wasn't enough time to recover as Quinn's strength was strong enough to deal with the clones with a single blow. It was something the multiplier had never dealt with before. As he started the cloning process, something weird was felt wrapping around his legs and arms. When he looked, he could see multiple purple, dark hands grabbing his limbs. What is this? Why isn't my cloning working? He said, shocked. Quinn had half expected this. His shadow had the ability to slow down time of whatever it was touching, and due to how the multiplier's ability worked right now, it was taking an incredibly long time to even clone himself. With this, the multiplier started to panic. He had always relied on his skills to move from one clone to other. In his haste, he hadn't realized if he had just concentrated in using all of his strength to break free from the shadow, he would have been able to break free. Instead, he repeatedly attempted to clone himself, but it just didn't seem to work. Finally, though he was able to detach his right arm, as he calmed down a little and started to think straight. 2100 MC. But it was useless, as more arms instantly came toward him, grabbing him and putting him in place up against the wall of the shadow void again. I better finish this in one blow, Quinn said, seeing how low his MC points were. Standing in front of the original multiplier, he was able to finally use a skill that wouldn't be wasted. Stomping his foot onto the ground and allowing the energy to rise up, he pulled back one hand and snapped explosively with the other. Hammer strike. The regular hammer strike was preformed and the fist sunk into the chest piece right in the center. In nearly an instant, his eyelids started to close, and the multiplier had been knocked out. I guess you never really been hit like that before, have you? Quinn thought, realizing he had been beaten with a single punch. The void skill was cancelled, and the victor's name had been called. Can you believe it? Is that really Quinn from our class? Wasn't he always a weakling? The students in Dell's class were amazed. However, some started to worry. Hey, didn't you used to pick on him? And Peter, you better apologize, man. What? You think he'll remember that? They had just witnessed someone defeat a level 8. Most of the students who were in Dell's class weren't even past the level 5. And suddenly, all those that once shunned or talked badly about him were afraid. Perhaps he isn't the blood evolver after all, Nate said, noticing that not a single red aura skill was displayed. But there were some signs that were confusing. He had seen kicks and punches, as well as the flash step. These were all skills the blood evolver preformed. Still, you're just another person for me to get excited over. Once the matches were over, the students were taken off the platforms and rushed to the side to get emergency care from the standby doctors. After a few minutes, the multiplier had woken up. It turned out his injuries weren't too bad, and his armor had absorbed most of the impact of the punch. Although there were still some internal injuries, he would need to be treated for later. He really had never been struck so hard before, and with the fear of everything happening, he had passed out. Before the next set of events were to start, they would have interviews with the participants in between. They interviewed each one until they finally went to the two people who they were looking forward to most, the participants of Match 5. The first to be interviewed was the unexpected loser of the match, Multiplier. They sat by the side of the arena by a bench where all the doctors and other participants were seen being treated in the background. The female reporter was there ready with her microphone. At the same time, her drone companion was Thea filming everything for everyone to see on the big screen. First, I would have to say you put on quite a show for everyone today, and it came as quite a surprise to us with the result today. Many people here expected you to win. It seemed like everything was going your way until one point. Once that void was created, can you tell us what happened in there? Or if you remember anything at all? The reporter asked. Recalling the memories of the dark place was not a pleasant thought, and the shock of a loss was still hitting him quite hard, so he was slow to answer. Yes, I remember what happened in there. Hands. Hands? The reporter said with a confused look on her face. There were hands everywhere. They grabbed me, all over the place, and I couldn't move. Black, shadowy-like hands, and that's when he delivered the final blow. Hearing this from up in the booth, Jack's eyes looked as if they were about to jump out of his sockets. What did he say? Dark, shadowy hands. The words that had been spoken had brought up a memory for him. When he had visited the second military base, these were memories he would never forget. He was embarrassed and humiliated as the two students were saved by Pure. There were two people who had interfered and had gotten in his way. After the events, he had his two guards file a report. Kenny talked about how a strange user, who seemed to control a shadow, had fought him. Not only that, there was also the mention of hands as one of the skills along with other things. Now that he thought about it more, the description matched new perfectly enough with the report his guard Kenny had given him. The powers used back then and the powers used now were the same. This brought him to one conclusion about Quinn. He works for Pure. Oh. After finding out about this revelation, Jack couldn't believe it. Slowly, it was starting to make sense of how they knew his every move and how they could plan against him. Of course, Pure would have put a student spy into the school system. Just how they rescued Peter before, they most likely used him to do the same here as well. You are always one step ahead of me, and now I know why. But now I'm one step ahead of you, Jack said with a smile as he got up from his seat. Where are you going, Jack? Oscar asked. Are you not going to watch the rest of the fighting events? There are some important business matters I need to look into. Don't worry, I shall be back soon. Jack left the room and started walking at a fast pace out of the booth to head back to his room. There were still a few things he needed to think about before he could make his next move. Even if Quinn was a part of Pure, that didn't change the fact that he had a rare ability that no one had seen before. Suddenly, claiming the student was part of Pure might make it harder for him to obtain the boy's powers. He wanted both Pure and the shadow power for himself. Quinn was the key to that. Once Jack had returned to the room, he had contacted his headquarters back at Dreamland City. A digital display on his wall, connecting a video call. Immediately, he had called for his old guard Kenny, who had made the report about the shadow powers before. That's right. So, everything you said matches up with exactly what I saw that day, Kenny replied. Just then, another message had appeared on screen, which was from Sergeant Duke. The information about the student I requested. Quickly, he started to read through the report. Quinn Talen, only child. Orphan. The perfect backstory for an agent of Pure. No surprise there. While Jack was busy talking about his team and doing research on Quinn, over at the arena, the reporter had just finished talking with Multiplier. She was now moving on to the star of the show, Quinn. First, I have to congratulate you on your upset victory. Of course, we all saw your impressive martial arts skill when fighting the clones, but what we really want to know about is your ability. My research says that you are not from an original family. Still, I don't think any of us here have ever seen an ability like that before. So what we want to know is just how and what ability is that? The reporter asked. Quinn looked at the big screen, and he could see his own face maximized for everyone to see. Everyone in the crowd was waiting for his answer. He then thought back to what Vorden had said. and he was ready to reply. As you said, I'm not from an original family. I grew up as an orphan. The detail of how I learned the ability is a story and a half, so bear with me. An incident happened at school a while back, where I was transported to a red portal planet. The whole place seemed abandoned. While I was there, I came across an ability book I had never seen before. I currently didn't have an ability, and I thought my luck had finally changed. The school eventually found me and returned me safely, but I chose to keep the fact I had found the book a secret. This event had happened a few months back. Due to it being a high-level ability book, it took me a long time to learn. Even after learning it, with no teacher or reference on how to use the ability, it took a while to come up with my own skills. I wasn't ready and chose to hide this from everybody. As an orphan and no family or factions to protect me, this felt like the right thing to do. However, today a good friend of mine had offered in return for giving them the ability book, I would become a member of their faction and family. As for the ability itself and which family that is, I think you will all understand why I won't go into further details about that now, as it's not fair to the original family who took me in. Before I end this interview, I have one last thing to say. Once again, Quinn looked up above the arena, where his friends and Vorden would be standing. If you chose to still go after me, then the chains that have been locked away for centuries shall be broken by the blades. There were many questions the reporter had wanted to ask, but Quinn had already started walking away after saying those few words. After hearing Quinn's story, the people in the crowd could understand the reasoning of what had happened so far and why the student had chosen to do what he had done. However, the families and factions in the crowds felt like what the student had just done was outright silly. Even if he didn't reveal the family's name that was protecting the book, they would find out soon. Declaring that this family had the ability book was putting a target on their back, and unless they were one of the big four, there was unlikely anything that would stop them from trying to take it from this family. However, the reaction in the booth was a completely different one. The last words had sent a shiver down each of the big three in the room's spine. Goosebumps were felt all over the place. Damn! Owen shouted in his head. For the first time, he wasn't so giggly cheery like his usual self. Instead, he was biting his fingernails. I knew this was a possibility after I saw the two of them were friends. But who would have thought? Now no one can touch him. Those last lines, Mona thought, they were quite clearly a code that only we would know. Oscar had noticed a slight change in the room. Usually, they were quite a rowdy bunch, especially with Bernie and Owen always bickering at each other. But now there was complete silence. Was it something the boy said? He thought, but he was concerned with a different matter. If what the student was saying was true, the red portal he had access to must have come from the military base they were at, which meant it was a planet the military had explored. Why was there such an ability book on a planet like that? Oscar wished to delve further once this whole event was over. Perhaps he would find clues about the ability book and what had happened on the red portal planet. It might even lead him to the original owners of the ability book. The rest of the event continued as usual, and Jack had eventually returned with a smile on his face. The event had now been going on for a while, and during it, not a word was spoken. They hadn't really focused on the matches at all. Each one of them's minds was filled with other matters, and finally, the event had come to an end. The Big Four returned to their rooms, and so did the Supreme Commander. As Jack went back, he started to think of a plan he could put in place. If he was only to inform the military of the matter without the others knowing, then maybe they would allow him to take the boy's ability. It would also make sure the power didn't fall into the other three's hands, and he knew they would like that. Still, it was a little risky. The best time to do anything would be when the boy returned to his military base. Pure still didn't know he knew about him. He had close connections with Duke and could use this to catch Quinn and take his powers before anyone could interfere. Going to his desk, he grabbed a bottle of whiskey that was out on display and poured himself a clean, nice shot with no ice. I deserve this for everything I've done today, Jack said as he lifted the glass in the air. Suddenly, he heard a knock at the door. A frustrated Jack placed the glass back on the table and answered it. "What is it?" he said with anger. But when he looked at who it was, he was surprised to see that it was Mona Bree. "I'm here to tell you about an emergency meeting between the Big Four. It will be regarding what happened today. You have to come now." Walking down the hallway, Jack was stomping away, his feet hard on the ground as he plodded along. He was just about to call it a night after successfully plotting his plan. What could be so important to call a meeting at this time, and why does it have to be now? He thought, frustrated. It wasn't just any meeting between the leaders, though. Mona had specifically told him that this was a meeting for only the Big Four families, which meant it didn't include the head generals or the supreme commander, as if it was something they didn't want them to know about. This was a rare matter, and the only time Jack had been called into a meeting like this before was when they decided to invite him to join the leaders' table, making the Big Three into the Big Four. Eventually, Mona had led him down the hallway, and they stopped just outside the Sundhild family room. When she pushed the heavy door open, the other two could already be seen sitting there waiting. The rooms they stayed in were quite grand and large, and there were several separate rooms. Each one was designed slightly different to suit their own style. Jack looked around the room. Even though it was the same layout, it looked completely different when comparing it to his own. Most of the decor used looked like it was from an older era. There were also several paintings of large beasts on the wall with a single man taking it down. Useless junk, as Jack would have called it, was scattered on top of desks and drawers. Nonetheless, Jack needed to comply, so he sat down at the large rounded table that looked like it was designed for 20, but only the 4 of them were present. This, of course, meant they were sitting quite far away from each other, but Jack liked this anyway. As the elder of the group, I shall be the one to start the meeting, Mona said. Although she didn't look old at all, Bernie looked to be in his 50s, and Jack was just reaching his 30s. Jack had always thought Mona was around the same age as him, but now she had suddenly declared that she was older. He was wondering what type of witchcraft she had to use to look so young. Now that he thought about, she certainly dressed like a witch as well. Even now in the middle of the night, she was dressed in all black, with a pointy hat and a veil covering her face. Does the mad women sleep in that? She stood up from her seat as she talked to the others. I'm sure you all know why I thought it was necessary to call this meeting, but I did so just to make sure we're all on the same page. They know what this is about already. Have they been doing things without me behind my back? Jack thought, we are here to talk about the Blade family. Them again. This is just a waste of time. We need to be dealing with Pure. Oh well, maybe I will learn something about them. We need to make sure that all our families and fractions, including the subfamilies, receive this message. They are prohibited no matter what, to either go after the student known as Quinn Talen or try to research which family he has given the ability book to. What did you say? Jack shouted as he shot up from his seat. I guess you weren't here for that part, Owen replied. I seem to remember you left the room at that time. The boy who won the match against the multiplier. Turns out he and his unique ability is under the protection of the Blade family. Yes, Bernie said, nodding his head up and down with his arms crossed on top of his large belly. We all heard it. The chains that have been locked away for centuries shall be broken by the Blades. And we all understand what he meant by that. The other 3 all nodded their head, but Jack didn't have a clue. He didn't have a grand history of ability users from the beginning of time. His family and his power were only discovered after the Dalki era. He knew nothing of what this damn code meant, and he was starting to get increasingly frustrated that no one was informing him. What he did understand was what that made clear. They were ordering nearly every person they could to not touch Quinn Talen. All of this was due to his connection with the Blade family, and he wasn't an exception to this rule most likely. My plans, they've been ruined. He needed to do something if he wanted to get that mysterious ability. Now the others would have people keeping a careful eye on him in the military base whenever they could. It would be impossible for him, even with his connections, to do much without them finding out. He didn't want to do it, but this was the only thing he could do. Quinn can't be related to the Blades, Jack said, because I'm sure he's with Pure. There was a brief moment of silence between the other 3 until they all started laughing together shortly after. That's impossible. Pure and the Blades are black and white. They would never see eye to eye in the current world. Mona replied, but I'm telling you the truth. If you don't believe me, I'll bring Quinn here right now and force a confession out of him. Enough, Bernie said as he slammed his fist on the table. Did you not hear what we just said? No one is to go after the boy, and that includes you, Jack. We don't agree on a lot of things, Jack. You can say that again, Owen mumbled. Hearing this, Bernie looked over at Owen out of the corner of his eyes, before shaking his head and continuing. But we all agree on this. If you try to lay a finger on that boy, we will do everything in our power to stop you. Who were these blades to be able to cause such fear and unity between these three powerful forces, yet at the same time seemed to have no power when it came to the things like the military? It just didn't make any sense. Fine, Jack said, sitting back down in his seat. With that, the meeting was quickly over, although they didn't finish it before reminding Jack once again that the military was to know nothing about this and to warn him about not going after the boy. His hands were tied. If it was just one of the big families telling him to not go after the boy, then he would risk a confrontation. But all three together? His family wasn't strong enough and would never come out alive. Jack was confident in his family's strength. Over time, he had gathered strong abilities and men by his side, and the unique thing about his family, their abilities were all versatile, while the others only had a single powerful ability. In a way, in his own head, Jack had deemed his own family as the strongest power force currently, even ahead of the military, but it wasn't enough to start a fight over, especially with the Dalki watching their moves. However, thinking about his family's strength made him think about something else. They were all clearly scared of the blades. They repeatedly told him not to go after Quinn. What that didn't stop him from doing was going after the blades. If he got rid of them, he would naturally take their seat of power. The others were clearly afraid of something that happened in the past, but they didn't know Jack's full strength either. He would much rather fight one family than three strong ones, and he would also get whatever power the blades have as well as the shadow power. It was the one plus side of Jack's ability. Whatever family he would defeat, essentially their powers would be added to his even if they refused to join, because he could take it from them with force. The Blade family. Let's see how scary you really are. Jack was ready for a war. As soon as Quinn's match had ended, he decided to go straight to his room, avoiding talking with any of the other participants or remaining in the training center. Even with his short walk back when walking by the next participants who would be taking part in the event, he could feel their eyes as if they were piecing the back of his skull. And the gossiping had started. When he finally arrived in his room, he quickly closed the door behind him and leant his back up against it, letting out a big breath. So I finally did it, he said with a smile. It feels nice not to be holding on to such a secret anymore. Still, just this was enough for him. One of the huge weights that were always on the back of his mind felt lifted, but he wasn't prepared for all the attention and reactions, so just for tonight, he wanted to rest. I hope Vorden's plan worked. When Vorden whispered in Quinn's ear telling him what to say, he sounded confident and assured him it would stop others from coming after him for his power. However, he did mention it would do nothing for the vampire, so he should still proceed with caution. Lying on his bed, all he wanted to do was shut his eyes. The fight had taken a lot out of him, not only physically but mentally as well. He realized how much harder fighting without relying on his vampire powers was. Looking at his gauntlets, there now was a large scratch mark and several dents on them as well. Inspect. Durability 40-100. Effects of gauntlets will be reduced by 50%. In the fight, he had blocked the multiplier's attacks a few times, and they were now severely damaged. It was a shame because the system shop only had one pair of each item. Even if he got his hand on the materials, he couldn't make another one. What he would have liked to have done is get a better pair altogether, but that would require crystals from advanced tier beasts. With no more expeditions for first-year students, he would either have to wait until he was in his second year or pay to put up a quest asking for certain materials, but his funds weren't exactly the healthiest at the moment either. If they were to break in the next fight, without the use of his vampire abilities, it would weaken his attacking power by quite a bit. Still, there was one more thing for Quinn to check out. An exciting surprise that he didn't expect after defeating the multiplier. Congratulations, you are now level 19. One free stat point earned. Will update to your current quest. Reach level 20 for your next step in your evolution. 19/20. He didn't see the number of EXP points received, and when checking his EXP, rather than the extra going over, currently, it just said 051200. This would assume that the reward was something similar to the quest that had been given when he first fought against Leo. An instant level-up reward. The free stat point was placed into his charm skill, increasing it now up to 29. After it reached level 30, he could then start to focus on his other skills. Charm was handy in helping Quinn keep his secrets, but soon he would have no secrets to keep, and the ones that would be after him next were the vampires. According to the system AI, the number of points and strength one would have to have in their charm to control another vampire would be enormous. Using the skills themselves, they naturally had some type of resistance to it. So Quinn needed to focus on getting stronger for what was about to come later. What Quinn was looking at most was the updated quest. There was only one more level until he would evolve into the next step. Would this mean a new appearance, a new set of blood skills, or would it just mean a new set of problems to deal with? With these thoughts in his head, he didn't remember when he had finally closed his eyes and fallen asleep. He was far more tired than he realized. All of a sudden, he heard the sound of urgent knocking at his door. Oh, why do people love knocking on my door all the time? Quinn thought as he looked at the time on his watch, and he could see that it was already the next day in the early morning. Did I already sleep the whole night? When rubbing his eyes and trying to move his quilt, he happened to spot something small on his left hand where his wristwatch was, a small metallic little spider. This is Logan's spider, right? What's it doing here? Quinn Talen, this is military personnel. Please open your door and let us in. 1 second, please. Let me just put on some clothes. Quinn shouted back. The spider quickly ran up to Quinn's ear and started to play a message. While this was all happening, Quinn promptly got dressed into the standard military uniform. Quinn, this is Logan. I kept this spider near you in case you needed a little help. My guess is the military might want to check the level gauge on your watch. Don't worry. My little friend here has already made the adjustments. The spider lifted 2 of its legs as if it was happy about Logan's words, and started to imitate a little clap. Make sure to keep the spider on you and don't panic. Let them do what they are here for, and everything will be okay. After listening to the message, the spider hopped down and went just underneath the cuff of his sleeve where his wrist was and stayed put. Putting his trust into Logan, and not really knowing what was going on, he opened the door to find Haley outside and what looked like one of the soldiers standing by her side. It's been a long time, Haley said, as she entered the room and placed a suitcase out on the table. This isn't usually my thing, but they asked me to do this. But before that, congratulations. When I saw you, I knew you were impressive, and don't worry. With all the injuries I see it happen at the school, I think you did nothing wrong, hiding your powers. She sat down in the seat by the desk, and the soldier carefully led Quinn over to her, keeping an eye on everything he was doing. Watching in case Quinn tried to pull anything. Haley proceeded to open the metal case, and inside it was what looked like a brand new military watch. Now I have to ask you not to touch anything, Haley explained. I will take off the old watch and also place the new one on. Quinn nodded in response and went along with it. Even if Logan had said not to worry, right now Quinn was worrying. When they had put the watch on, what would happen when it didn't record his MC cells? Would they find out he wasn't human, or would they then take him in for further questioning? The watch had been taken off and placed on the table. At the same time, she picked up the new one from the suitcase and wrapped it around Quinn's wrist. The watch seemed to be turning on slowly, and at the same time while underneath his wrist, the little spider started to get to work. Haley remained silent, and so did Quinn as they both carefully waited for a result. After a few moments, the watch finished booting up, and the display had changed. It went from level 1 to a level 6. Well, that makes a lot of sense, she said with a smile on her face. I was a little worried it would say 1 there for a second. Do you know why the watch didn't display the correct level even after learning the ability? No, I just decided to go with it, since I thought it was better this way, Quinn replied. Not a problem, Haley said with a smile as she put the broken watch in the suitcase and left with the guard. Before closing the door, she had one last word to say. Good luck on the tournament. I'm rooting for you, cursed child, she said as she giggled and shut the door. His face had gone bright red with embarrassment. After hearing a pretty lady like that say his stage name, he now realized how lame it sounded, and he just wanted to make a hole and put his head in it. However, thanks to Logan again, it seemed like he could relax. His vision to look and plan ahead for things had saved him many times. Not wanting the attention of the others outside, instead of training like everyone else was doing, he decided to wait in his room until he was called for the next event. Unlike Peter, Quinn wasn't treated like a criminal and was able to stay in contact with the others above using the wristwatch and other methods. They told him what was going on with the events and such, but not much else had happened. The time had come, and an announcement had been made, stating that the participants of the fighting tournament would now be placed in their groups. Leaving the room, everything was different this time when he entered the practice hall. It was the third day of the event, and there were even fewer people now than before. Not only that, every single person there seemed to be looking at him, and this included the second years. Ignoring everything, Quinn decided to stay at the back of the whole group where the students had gathered, as the organizers called out their names. This way, he knew no one would be able to look at him from behind. However, he quickly realized how useless this was, as now everyone seemed to be turning their heads slightly to the side, trying to look back at Quinn. Okay, and for Group C, we have Ben Richard, Steve Gillian, Jason Wong, Susie Filibuster, Maze Kilbert, Nate Snell, and Quinn Talen. Yes, Nate shouted as his name was called out. The others looked at him wondering what he was so excited for, but only he knew. For days he had been hoping to face a half-decent opponent, but so far he had only been disappointed. After seeing the cursed child be put in the same group as him, he was sure his luck had now changed for good. He knew the next fight, the two of them would be facing off against each other. While the names from Group C were being called out, the others in the group had gathered and started to look at each other as they noticed something odd. Nate looked at his own group, then looked at the group around them again, trying to figure out what was wrong. "Why does our group look different?" he asked. "It's because there's 7 of us," Quinn replied. Suddenly, Nate's heart started to beat. There was an odd amount of people. This often happened due to the number of participants taking part in the tournament. However, more often than not, a few people would drop out, or even a double knockout in cases. This would eventually even up the numbers. If they had enough people, they wouldn't even bother calling up the substitute since it would just complicate matters. Right now, in the fighting tournament, there must have been an odd amount of people, and when this happens, it means only one thing. "All right," the soldier said, holding something behind his back the others couldn't quite see. "As you can see, Group C is filled with 7 people rather than 6 or 8, which means one of you won't be fighting today and will be able to move on to the next round. Lucky you." "Damn it," Nate said, stomping the floor. "Damn it. Why this group? Why? He cried. To the others, this would be a blessing, but to Nate, it seemed like another obstacle trying to get in his way. The soldier waited until Nate calmed down until proceeding further. He then revealed what he was hiding behind his back, and it was 7 small sticks held in his hand with the bottom part covered up. One of these sticks' bottom half is dyed red. "Whoever chooses this one shall be free from this round." "Let's see," he said as he scanned the room. "You," the soldier said, pointing at Quinn. "You're first." Quinn casually walked up to the front. There was no use trying to figure out which one was the red one, so he just picked the one closest to him. The stick was completely clear when pulling out, and there wasn't a red marking at all. "Yes!" Nate shouted out loud again. Now Quinn was starting to realize how much Nate wanted to fight him. However, this wasn't like the others, who tried to fight him because he was weak or to try to show off their own skills. It was because Nate thought he was strong. Thinking about this made him feel a little warm inside. It was a change and a feeling he had never had before. No one hated his guts for being weak, and no one wanted to bully him. The other participants were called, and they all pulled out cleave sticks until, eventually, only the last 2 participants were left. You up," the soldier said, pointing at Nate. He was happy about this. It meant his fate was going to be in his hands, not of another's. There were now only 2 sticks left. If he chose the wrong one, then it just wasn't meant to be. He looked left, he looked right, his eyes darting backwards and forwards between the 2 sticks. "Just pick one already," the soldier said. Getting agitated that time was being wasted. Closing his eyes and turning his head away, Nate finally picked a stick. "Well, it looks like you won't be taking part in this round then." Hearing those words made his heart sink. A lump was felt in his throat. "What?" Nate said as he opened his eyes and turned his head, only to see that the soldier was no longer standing in front of him and was standing next to the other student instead. When looking at his stick, he noticed it was completely clay. There was no marking at all. There wasn't time to celebrate for Nate, as the soldier was already leading them all onto the arena floor. "I knew the world wanted me and you to fight," Nate thought. This was just another sign that nothing was going to get in our way. As they exited from the underground tunnel and onto the floor, the cheers were there as usual, and the others were watching above on the large screen. "Oh, this will be interesting," said Sam, seeing the screen. "What do you mean by that?" Vorden asked. "Well, the reason I've been keeping a close eye on the event so far is that my close friend is in it, and it looks like Quinn, and he is in the same group," Sam replied. "Friend, judging by how you were hanging around us all the time, I would have assumed you had no friends," Logan replied. That comment had stung Sam in the heart a bit, but he couldn't deny the fact that if others did know he was hanging around with a bunch of first years from another base, it really would look like he had no friends. "Is your friend strong?" Vorden asked. "You better believe it," said Sam. Although he's only a level 7 in terms of ability power, you can tell how strong he is based on how he was able to make it this far. "I look forward to seeing him fight then," Vorden said. "Well, let's just hope your friend and Quinn don't get put together. Otherwise, it would be pretty awkward," said Layla. "Yeah, I would feel bad supporting my friend right next to you guys, but as far as I know about Nate, he would be begging to be put up against Quinn." And that was exactly what Nate was doing. The whole way, as he walked, he had his hands held together and his eyes closed. He would only rely on his hearing to follow the footsteps in front of him. Then finally, they came to a halt. "All right, Quinn Talen Stage 3 and Nate Snell," the soldier said. He couldn't believe it. His prayers were answered, and he was finally going to fight someone worthwhile. The two got into position and waited for the announcers to call all of the names. This time there were only 3 platforms, and once again, they had increased in size. And finally, on the 3rd platform, we have the unexpected winner from last round, the Cursed Child, and his opponent for today who always seems to manage to pull a win out of the bag, Hard Steely. The Earth user raised the two onto the platform, but Quinn was struck with something after hearing the name. It was about the stage name that had been used. He had instantly recognized it because it was the first friend he had ever added on the Power Fighters VR game. These two are the same person. Quinn was very thankful to Nate. He had given him advice before the Portal Planet and also taught him a great lesson when it came to fighting. If he ever met this person in real life, Quinn wanted to thank him for his help. He never thought he would be meeting a person he met through a game this way right now. When the two walked onto the large fighting area, the happiness on Nate's face could be seen a mile away, and the camera right now was focused on him. What's wrong with him? Is he not all there? The comments about him weren't nice as always, but he didn't care. If he was happy, he would show it. If he was sad, he would show it. Unlike the others, he wouldn't be fake and would just be himself. What was the point of pretending to be something you weren't? Let's get this fight started. Show me that purple shadow of yours, Nate said, punching his fist into his other hand. Each time this was done, a loud clanging sound was heard as if metal was clashing against metal. Quinn smiled at Nate and then raised his hand. I forfeit from the fight. The referee, who was slightly off the side and just outside the arena, was surprised at this. He looked at Quinn for confirmation only to hear him repeat it. I forfeit from the fight. He is your winner. Quinn repeated. No. Nate said, why are you doing this to me? Why are you refusing to fight me? Is it because you don't think I'm strong enough? Come on, I'll show you right now. He shouted. However, Quinn couldn't tell Nate the real reason. Quinn knew he was plenty strong, perhaps one of the strongest people he had met before. When the fight had started, he had received a quest. A strong opponent has appeared. Defeat the opponent in front of you to receive an instant level up. This was the reason why Quinn decided not to continue the fight. Whether he would win or not only using his shadow abilities was another story, but what he didn't want to do was evolve in front of everybody. If he were to win the fight, the process would start immediately, and not knowing its result was too much of a risk. He could have always fought and then allowed Nate to win at the end, but judging from how they fought before, Nate wouldn't have liked that. No, I refuse. I don't care. I'm fighting, you know, and you better start throwing back, Nate said as he walked his way across the arena and towards Quinn. But the referee had come in between the two of them, stopping Nate midway. The contestant has already forfeited. This match is over. The audience watching was all confused at what was happening as they were unable to hear the conversation going on. Then the announcement was made. Hardsteely has been declared the victor due to forfeit. The crowd was stunned by what had just happened, and so were the others in the booth. But they couldn't be for long, as two more interesting fights were happening by the side and their attention quickly focused on them instead. They could worry about why the other chose to drop out later. Please, Nate said, just tell me why you won't fight me. I never said I wouldn't fight you, Quinn replied. We don't have to fight here. If you really want to fight me, we can do it when this event is over through the game Power Fighters. Nate had never thought about this before. He didn't care where they thought. All he wanted to do was have a good fight. Wait, what's your ID name? Nate asked. Quinn smiled at him once again. Don't worry, we're already friends.